Okay, we'll commence in about 30 seconds. We're just waiting for people to log on.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning, everybody. Apologies. I usually like to start these things on time. Today, before we begin, I would like to... Sean's got it. It's good. It's our usual thing. We're good. Yep. We're on the Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The Anishinaabe people have lived here on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence are nurtured and continue to be nurtured on this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people of the Anishinaabe Nation. The city honors the First Nations, the Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions. Today, we do have regrets from Councillor Gower and Councillor Kitts. And before we begin today's meeting, seeing that, I'm looking around the table if there's any objection. I have nobody on the right of me, by the way, today. I don't know what is going on here, but you're all virtual, so thank you for joining. I'm looking at today's Vice Chair being Vice Chair Troster. Looking around the table, any objections to that? Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for filling that role today. At this moment, I'll get Melinda to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Gower. Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Councillor Luloff.
Bonjour.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts and Chair Tierney.
Present. Thank you very much.
Chair.
Most appreciated. So at this point, I'll go through the agenda clearing component of the agenda. So we have notices of information previously distributed, declarations of interest, seeing that there's none, confirmation of the minutes, PWIC minutes 18, Thursday, the March 27th, 2025. Is this item carried?
Confirm.
We have items 4.1 and 4.2. 4.2 we're going to hold, which is the evening and weekends parking rate. 4.1 is simply the 2024 Parking Services Annual Report. We have no speakers on that item. Is that item carried? Great, thank you. And so, as mentioned, we'll go back to 4.2 later on in the agenda. Item 5, we have a councillor speed reduction on Armstrong Road and River Road Lineback. There is no speakers, no presentation. We do have a small amendment. I'll ask Councillor DeRoche at this point to read in the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I move that be it resolved that the report recommendation be amended to replace 60 km per hour with 70 km per hour. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor DeRoche. Does anyone see this item to be held on the agenda? Seeing none on the board either. Carried. Is that item carried? Thank you. We have no in-camera items, and that's as far as we'll go within the agenda for now because we do have other items. Melinda, that would be correct. And I'm looking at Rob. Yep, they're waving at me, so I think we're good. So at this point, we do have a presentation by staff. We'll go through the usual process. Staff will get them to come forward in regards to item 4.2, evening and weekend parking rate review. So I'll get our amazing staff, Scott Caldwell, Quentin Levesque, and Brian Babs to come forward. There's a slideshow. We'll go through the presentation, and then we'll immediately, before we do that, maybe I'll get Vice Chair Troster in our wonderful blue blazer to read in the motion that will be in front of us today. As amending replacement motion, essentially. It's a motion to go forward today for discussion debate as we have the delegations. Vice Chair Troster.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas the city recognizes the value that restaurants and entertainment venues generate for our city and the important role they play in creating jobs for our residents, and whereas the city has historically not enforced paid parking in commercial areas on Sundays or after 5:30 p.m., and whereas the staff report recommends substantial changes to paid parking practices citywide, which may require some time for residents, business owners, and their staff to adjust to. Therefore, it be resolved that the adjusting on-street hours of operations section of the rate setting guidelines as included in document 3 to the evening and weekends parking rate review report be amended as follows. The extent of paid parking in the evening, weekdays and weekends, where warranted, will be 7:30 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. Weekend, daytime, and evening parking, where warranted, will be limited to Saturday instead of both Saturday and Sunday. Be it further resolved that parking services report back to the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee in Q2 2027 on the effectiveness of the measures implemented as part of this report and with proposed changes they believe may be required when they report back. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. So at this point, we'll go to the presentation, then delegations, and then questions to staff. Quentin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good morning, Chair and members of the committee. This morning, I'm joined by Scott Caldwell, Manager of Parking Services, as well as Brian Babs, who's responsible for a studies program within Parking Services. We're here this morning to share the outcomes from staff's evening and weekend parking rate review. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott and Brian to start the presentation.
Thank you, Quentin, and good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Next slide, please. So the need for this review is something that was identified when staff were in the process of updating the municipal parking management strategy in 2018 and 2019. At that time, it was noted that the days and hours of on-street paid parking were entirely legacy-based, rooted in decades-old policy decisions. As a result, there was a lack of clear justification and rationale related to the timing of on-street paid parking. In turn, there are missed opportunities to create consistency in the approach from area to area and also to better manage parking to fulfill the objectives of the municipal parking management strategy to ensure available short-term parking in support of businesses, institutions, and tourism. The process to undertake this review was too significant to complete as part of the municipal parking management strategy refresh, so was identified and committed to as a follow-on item. The original intent was to start the review immediately following the strategy update, but the pandemic delayed that and staff started the process in late 2023, which is culminated in this report. Next slide, please. In following through on this commitment, staff have engaged in research, data collection, and analysis. This has involved careful consideration of the demand patterns on a zone-by-zone basis across both the existing and the pending paid parking zones throughout the city. Consultation has been just as important as part of this process as we've progressed through the 3 phases of consultation that I'll cover in a little more detail on the next slide. Collectively, These steps have produced the recommended changes to the rate setting guidelines that are in the report, and if approved, the rate setting guidelines would be updated. Staff would proceed with the initial changes and conduct annual assessments to ensure that the timing of paid parking is appropriate and responsive to any changes that may occur. Next slide, please. From a consultation perspective, we've engaged with a number of stakeholders across 3 different phases dating back to October 2023. This process allowed staff to be transparent with key stakeholders about the review and receive feedback at the different stages. Included among the stakeholders were Ecobia, BIAs with paid parking, places of worship, and our parking stakeholder consultation group, which includes representatives from BIAs as well as community associations, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, tourism, and older adults. In total, there were 30 consultation sessions with external groups across all 3 phases. Next slide, please. The early process helped to clarify key issues to address. This is a summary of the more prominent ones that came up through either the data collection, consultation, or a combination thereof. First, as has been referenced, the timing of on-street paid parking is primarily legacy-based, and there are inconsistencies that exist without any clear rationale. Couple of examples to that point, and one of them is illustrated in the top right here, which shows the start time during the weekdays for paid parking, and the different colors represent different start times, and they vary from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., some at 8:30, and some at 9 a.m. In addition to that, Saturday paid parking exists in some areas, but not in others. An example being there's Saturday daytime paid parking in Glebe, but not in Little Italy or Chinatown. In addition, there's Saturday paid parking in Byward, but not in the Centertown or downtown areas. From the data and through consultation, it was identified that there is a lack of available parking in some areas during the evenings and on weekends. And one thing that we specifically heard through consultation and we've heard in the past is that there is often a disconnect between parking signage and the paid parking hours, which can cause issues. Next slide, please. Part of the research component was to establish some context around how other cities have evolved relative to where we are. Across Canada, most larger cities extend their paid parking into the night, as late as 10 or 11 p.m. in some cases, whereas Ottawa does not. Most also have some form of Sunday paid parking in their commercial areas specifically, and we do not. In particular, Sunday paid parking represents an evolution as commercially, Sundays have changed over the decades, and they are now much more aligned to how things operate on Saturdays, and the data collected supports this. These comparators notwithstanding, the focus of this process was on coming to something that is an Ottawa solution in alignment with our municipal parking management strategy and mandate. This is consistent with the approach taken in developing the demand-based pricing model, which was implemented starting in 2024. Next slide, please. Before getting into what is being proposed as part of these changes, it's important to address paid parking and its role as a key tool to assist in the management of parking where there are high demands. It's important to stress its purpose, which is to promote turnover towards increasing the availability of parking to better serve visitors and businesses. The potential benefits extend beyond more available parking spaces as well. As it's summarized here, there's an expected reduction in the amount of traffic circulating through a community looking for parking at busier times. And this has positive impacts when it comes to emissions and from a safety perspective. While the use of parking fee revenues is constrained per the Municipal Act, when considering any additional revenue, there are investment opportunities back into the community to improve the level of some services and increase amenities. Examples include expanding the EV charging network, increased secure bike parking, potential investments in shared micromobility, leveraging technology to better manage parking, and support for initiatives to replace and add off-street parking where it's needed. So with that, I will hand things over to Brian to discuss the outcomes of the review.
Thank you, Scott. Next slide, please. So So to stay aligned with the rate setting guidelines and support simplicity and transparency, we're proposing clear, easy to communicate parameters applied consistently across all rate zones, such as a single rate for each zone and thresholds to either expand or remove paid parking if demand is either too high or too low, such as if peak demand is 80% or higher, extend paid parking hours into the evening and on weekends. But also on the flip side, if demand drops below 50%, those extended hours can be removed as well. Now, with that said, any changes to evening or weekend hours would only be made once a year and only if 2 consecutive data collections, one in the spring and one in the fall, both meet the required thresholds. Next slide. Now, we're proposing to harmonize paid parking hours during weekdays and weekends. First, I'll address weekdays since there will be limited daytime changes. So we're harmonizing the weekday paid parking start time to 8:30 in all zones, except for a few streets that have peak hour traffic restrictions. Now, if the data supports peak demands of 80% or higher over 2 consecutive collections, we're proposing to extend parking hours into the evening until 9 p.m. Next slide. Now I'll address the weekends where some additional changes take place. So the first change we're proposing is to transition from a Saturday only to a weekend parking. Now, Saturday and Sunday parking trends are very similar and interchangeable. Therefore, this allows us to avoid multiple rate scenarios. Next, we're proposing to harmonize daytime hours at 10 a.m. to align with paid parking hours of when businesses are open and operating. Finally, we're proposing to extend parking into the evening to 9 p.m., but only in high demand areas that meet peak demand thresholds of 80% or higher and already have weekday evening parking. Next slide. Now, this table shows the current paid parking hours for each rate zone, along with the proposed changes based on peak demand thresholds. Now, 8 out of the 20 existing rate zones will not see any changes to the paid parking hours. 3 zones, Vanier, War Museum, and Rideau, currently have Saturday paid parking, but 2 consecutive data collections showed peak demands below 50%. So as a result, Saturday paid parking will be removed in these areas. Now, 8 zones reach peak demand levels of 80% or higher. Weekend daytime paid parking will be extended to Sunday in the downtown and Glebe zones. Weekday evening parking will be extended in the Glebe South zone, and paid parking will be extended to evenings 7 days a week in Little Italy South, Byward, and surrounding rate zones. Next slide, please. Now, starting September 1st, we're introducing 5 new paid zones in Kitchissippi. These zones were established through the Kitchissippi Paid Parking Study. However, the proposed hours were to be determined based on the evening and weekend rate review. Now, most of the zones in the Kitchissippi area will have daytime only paid parking, either 7 days a week or weekdays only ending at 5:30 in the afternoon. Now, Richmond West between Athlone and Broadview will have extended paid parking hours into the weekday evenings until 9 p.m. Next slide. Now, one of the common complaints we hear is about inconsistent parking regulations that don't match the posted paid hours. That's why we're aligning time limits with paid parking hours as much as possible. So whenever paid parking is extended into the evening, the time limits will also be extended to 9 p.m. This ensures that signage aligns with paid hours and reduces confusion about when payment is required. Now, in areas with 2-hour time limits, someone arriving at 7 p.m. can pay to park until 9 p.m., after which regular overnight parking resumes as usual. Now, this approach brings consistency and clarity to the curb, especially in busy areas where confusing parking rate regulations are often a challenge. Next slide. Now let's look at what we expect these changes will achieve. We'll increase availability of short-term parking at busier times. So we're prioritizing turnover in high-demand areas so that short-term spaces are available when people need them the most, especially near busy shops, services, and restaurants. A data-driven implementation based on parking demand to create clear and consistent criteria across all areas. So we're using area-specific data to set parking hours and rates that reflect the needs of each area. This creates a clear and consistent criteria across all zones while still allowing flexibility when demand evolves. It's also going to create a responsive approach to changes in demand. So as new businesses open, transit routes evolve, or neighborhoods change, our parking system will adapt, keeping parking effective and relevant. More consistency between signage and paid hours. Better alignment between posted time limits and paid parking hours means less confusion for drivers and better parking experience overall. They'll also have additional capacity for investment in sustainable transportation. So additional parking revenues will be reinvested into road and sidewalk maintenance, transit services, including park and ride, bike parking, and EV charging programs to promote sustainable mobility. Now I'd like to pass it back to Scott, who will discuss the communications plan.
Thank you, Brian. Next slide, please. So there's certainly an acknowledgement that the resulting changes would not be insignificant. It will be important to ensure that information is put out and made readily available in order to support a transition that is as smooth as possible. In the report, there's mention of staff developing a communications plan, and work to pull those pieces together has already started. What's captured here are expected to be the key components of that approach. If approved, staff would begin implementing the plan early in the summer with the development of materials, which will be relayed through social media, ottawa.ca, and through the BIAs and ward councillors. We would also explore how to best convey the information at the street level through either signage or with timing information on the individual machines. Next slide, please. So if approved, staff would work in short order to complete the necessary steps related to changing the rate setting guidelines and arranging for the operational changes relating to signage and machine programming. As discussed on a previous slide, just as important will be to finalize and start implementation on the communications plan, which will be a continuing effort through to when the changes are put in place. Those changes will start in early September and would be a phased implementation, which will take a few weeks to complete. Going forward, staff would regularly collect data and will assess all zones on an annual basis to identify and make changes as are warranted, which could include extending or scaling back days and hours of paid parking, depending on the circumstances on a zone-by-zone basis. Staff will also leverage the Parking Services Annual Report to report on the changes and outcomes through the sharing of the data collected. Next slide. I thank you for your time, and as appropriate, happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's going to be questions for you at the end. Again, we'll go directly to delegations as per usual, and then we'll come back to answer some questions. I wanted to thank you, and I know you communicate very well with all council colleagues. It looks like you communicated with a great list of 6 people, 30 consultations, and you've done what we directed you as city council to go out and do. So I want to thank you in advance, but we do have some great, and we are listening, and we always are. That's why I've had the opportunity to go out and speak to 10 different verticals or different types of businesses and consult heavily with the councillors affected the most. But we do have a lot of those delegations because I kind of asked them on the radio to come out and speak. So I guess they're here. So we've had a request to swap one out, and I've gone to the committee. They're fine with having a Cobia actually move ahead first with Daryl Cox. And Mr. Becta, you'll be moving down to 8th. I informed you that this morning. Great. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Great. Mr. Cox, you're no stranger to this place, and you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members of committee. My name is Daryl Cox, and I am Chair of the Ottawa Coalition of BIAs and also the Executive Director of the Glebe Business Improvement Area. The Ottawa Coalition of BIAs represents Ottawa's 18 BIAs who collectively have over 2,500 commercial properties throughout the city, accounting for $162 million in property tax and over 6,500 businesses who contribute $8 million in BIA levy payments, much of which directly benefits the City of Ottawa through initiatives we undertake such as public realm improvements. While we appreciate committee being open to discussion and compromise with the motion that has been proposed today, on behalf of Acobia and our members, I am here today to urge you to oppose the proposed changes to evening and weekend parking. We've heard from our members that these proposed changes will have detrimental impact on the local economy. The decision adds yet another significant burden on our small business community who continue to face the ongoing impacts of the drug and homelessness crisis, tariff uncertainties, and the high cost of doing business. The prevailing sentiment amongst business owners is one of exhaustion and uncertainty about the future. Our small and medium-sized businesses rely heavily on evening and weekend foot traffic, and removing free parking during these peak times will create an undue deterrent to local shopping. This proposal risks discouraging visitors by creating a perception of inconvenience and shortening customer visit times. These proposed changes also fail to reflect the day-to-day realities of local businesses. Customers frequently spend several hours in our BAs visiting multiple establishments during a single trip, a pattern that directly supports the economic health of our communities. Moreover, the city has a duty of care to consumers who will ultimately bear the cost of these changes through increased fees and reduced convenience. This proposal will disproportionately affect Ottawa's downtown core and Main Street commercial districts, undermining current efforts to revitalize these essential economic and cultural hubs. We urge the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee and City Council to reconsider this proposal and ask that a comprehensive economic impact study be conducted to fully assess the consequences of these parking changes on our local economies. We also call on the city to collaborate with COBIA and affected BIs to develop practical business-friendly parking solutions that support the vitality and vibrancy of Ottawa's main streets and neighborhoods. Thank you for your attention to this important issue.
Great. Thank you, Daryl. Way under 5 minutes. I appreciate that. Vice Chair Troster.
Hi, Daryl. Thanks for being here. So
Thank you.
the Glebe has a 3-level city parking lot.
Yes.
It's frequently not empty, correct?
Correct.
Not full, correct?
Right.
Okay. That is within very.
Well, I mean, at various times, yes, there are times, and Scott probably, I don't know if you have the top of your head, Scott, but it is certainly, we do face significant challenges, Councillor, in terms of on-street paid parking. We are working with, trying to work with Scott and his department in terms of, what's interesting, we're finding that there's a lack of knowledge of the paid parking garage. For some reason, people aren't aware that it's there despite the signage. So we're looking to see if we can find some better wayfinding signage for the parking garage. And that's a key priority for the Glebe BIA for this year, as to increase awareness. So
Yeah, I mean, that strikes me as a good solution. I always say, you know, you can walk 10 minutes from your car in a Costco parking lot in the suburbs. And as far as I'm concerned, that city parking lot in the Glebe is no farther away from most Glebe businesses than you would be if you were at the other end of a parking lot in the suburbs. So I appreciate that on the wayfinding piece. And what do you say to the data that shows that the problem is a lack of movement? The goal here is not more revenue for the city. The goal right here is actually to have more movement in your parking so you can get more customers to your businesses.
yes,
That's what the data shows.
right. Yeah, and that's certainly from, and I can speak from a Glebe BIA perspective, because we, as you can see, we're affected significantly by these changes. And that is one thing that we see is that turnover is important, and that is, you know, the one benefit is we need to see that turnover. However, we are seeing that there's it's difficult. Some of the business want that turnover, and others, they just don't see that it's they just see the perception of the paid parking is what is driving people away.
Like parking rates are at over 80%, so it's not driving people away right now.
What the perception? So what we're saying is, if it is increased till 9, that people are telling us, and business owners are telling us, and I'm sure that other people who were speaking today who are business owners, that the perception of having the parking till 9 o'clock is they're saying, well, we don't. I was just speaking with the executive director from Centertown, do you know well, saying that she was speaking with a local business owner, saying that they are now, this would negatively impact their business. People have that perception of, you know, now it's going to be paid parking, that they would, you know, look at going to the mall instead.
Okay, well, you know, the compromise motion, I think, will give us a year to show the data of going until 7:30.
Yeah.
Which frankly, if you're going for dinner, you might only end up paying for half an hour. But I think sometimes you need to see it to believe it, but every major study of parking that's been done in any major city shows that when you reach the 80% threshold, that metering actually makes sense and actually improves the prospect for finding parking in the neighborhood. So sometimes it's about the data versus the impression. And I think what we're looking here is the opportunity to collect the data before implementing the full proposal.
And I greatly appreciate that as well. We're seeing that in the BI with the Bank Street feasibility study in terms of looking at what's the perception of parking versus the reality that the business owners feel as well. So
We need to deal in data, not just perception.
100%. So I agree that if this is, if we can implement this, look at what the data says after a certain amount of time, then I think that's probably a great approach.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a couple more questions for you, Daryl. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, sir. Thank you for your delegation. So I appreciate your perspective that your concern here is the impact that it might have on your customers. Those customers that have that free parking access now might have to pay and so forth, and that could deter them. In the same vein, if, as Councillor Troster was saying, if the concern here is turnover, as the representative of the BIA, do you not have the same concern for potential customers that might want to frequent these stores, but feel deterred and choose to go shop otherwise because parking is taken up for so long? Don't you have the same concern for that potential economy?
Yes.
And could you see this as an opportunity of perhaps targeting and bringing in those new customers?
Sorry, what's the last point, Councillor? And
If your concern is not only for customers that you already have that will now have to pay for parking, and you may lose customers there, if in the same vein, if you are potentially losing customers who can't park because there's no turnover, and you said that you do see that as a concern, could you see these changes as a way of getting those customers into your stores?
yeah, I believe so. Yeah. I mean, there's always a concern. I say the perception of the paid parking. Yeah, yes. But if we can encourage the turnover, I think that's an important aspect of this. And in speaking with our board at the Glebe BI, yes, we do see the advantage of having that turnover.
Thank you. And I do think that paid parking, at least one of the underpinnings of it, is to encourage turnover. And if this passes, I truly do hope that it supports your businesses. The other question I wanted to ask, if your businesses are concerned about the impact that this might have on these economic activities, during the staff presentation, you may have seen the slide that Ottawa is one of the only cities that does not have evening parking or weekend parking in those cities where their economic commercial areas have that evening parking.
Right.
Did you consult with your counterpart BIAs in other cities that have evening parking, that have weekend paid parking, to see if that has had a negative impact on what I presume to be their thriving business areas?
No, we have not.
Okay. And then the last question, the concern you have about providing access for parking to your customers, is it fair to assume that the concern that you have also extends to your employees, to not your employees, but employees of these businesses, that they have access to parking?
Yeah, that's a frequent concern that we hear, Councillor, is just that, if we're looking at in some areas, and once again, if I can go back to the Glebe, just because I know it so well, we have a variety. We have 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour parking throughout the Glebe. And I know that that's something that we're working with Councillor Menard to harmonize, but it's difficult given the process that, basically my understanding is the residents need to approve any of those changes on the street. So it's quite challenging, but we are working with Councillor Menard on that. That would make a huge difference, I believe, in many. One of the things we haven't talked about as well is extending the time frame as well. But, from 2 hours to 3 hours would make a huge difference as well in many of the BIAs. So that's something that could be considered. And if there's an opportunity to change that, I think that would be very helpful. But to your question, yes, employee parking is a significant issue. There's many that are paying a significant amount for employees to park in parking garages, in city lots. And if you're a small business owner, that's a significant hit on your bottom line. Otherwise, you're having your employees are running out, you got their alarms on their Apple Watches or whatever, and just running out every 3 hours or 2 hours to have to find a new parking spot. And once again, I speak on from the Glebe, it's challenging to find parking in the Glebe during the day.
I can appreciate that. And I can appreciate that as in representing businesses, obviously you have a concern that you want paying customers to have access to parking, whether it's paid or not, so they can come in and spend money. And of course, you have a concern to make sure that your employees can access their businesses, but they're obviously not spending money there. Just so you know, one question I'm going to be bringing to staff is I think what could be best for all businesses is that you have as much turnover for customer parking And I believe that paid parking can generate that turnover. But that if, for example, if we have an underused 3-story parking garage in the Glebe area, that perhaps that is your designated parking area for employees. And maybe we can, we can cut off or apportion segments of a paid parking garage for employees at a discounted rate for longer than 3 hours. That might be a win-win solution for everybody.
I love that idea. And Councillor Tierney, when you were on one of the radio shows recently, the radio host brought that up. And so I thought that was a brilliant idea. So I was hoping that that would come to part of the discussion. So I think it's brilliant. And to Councillor Troster's part and what point, we do have the availability in that lot in the Glebe, and I'm sure there might be others or city-owned lots throughout the city, even if there could be some sort of compromise made with, with the private sector parking lots, if there's some sort of work that could be done, I think that would take the employee parking off the streets, provide that opportunity for more customers for on-street paid parking.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bill Carroll.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a Bill's bill. That's what we're going to call it if it passes. But certainly, thank you. Thank you for that. We have a couple more questions for you, Councillor DeRoche.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cox, for your delegation today, and I'm sensitive to your comments on the concerns of business in terms of this business environment we're in. You're here on behalf of the BIAs, and maybe you can just remind me the levies that the boards have put in place. Like, did those go up this year across the board? I can't remember. I know council got a report on it, and I know several BIAs have reserves because they're saving up for various projects. Did the levies go up this year?
So that is the responsibility of each BIA when it comes to budget time. I didn't look at the report that went through in terms of, I know we did increase. Typically BIAs will increase by cost of living. Okay. Just to account for, all the increased fees or costs that we would have. But I from a BI perspective, BI, yes, we did increase ours. And I know in speaking to some others that there was an increase. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you.
Great. Conseil Plante.
Yes, hi, thanks for being here. I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on those 15-minute spots we have like in the Byward Market? We have these kind of 15-minute spots where sometimes people go over, sometimes they're just rushing in and out, but they are free and they're heavily monitored. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think that would be that would be helpful in many areas. If we look at in many BIs where you have a pharmacy or something where you're just going to do a quick pickup, drop off, I think the 15-minute spots would be valuable. I've worked in a couple of townships outside of Ottawa in previous roles, and they've all had 15-minute parking outside of some of the stores. So if that's something that could be implemented, I understand the challenges though in terms of enforcement. But as our businesses in the Glebe will tell you, there's no lack of bylaw parking enforcement in Bank Street.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you very much for coming out today. Again, I've been heavily involved in getting around to a lot of restaurants. Dave has some good pizza. I shouldn't be bonusing by saying that. Anyway, it's great to work directly with the business owners in the area. So thank you for coming out today.
Great. Thank you, Chair and Committee. Thank you.
Oddly enough, our next delegation is Dave Mingono from the Grand Pizza. I don't know if Dave's joining us online or if he'll be joining us in person today.
I'm here.
Wonderful, Dave. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to give a thanks to Councillor Tierney and to Councillor Plante for basically being there for us and communicating and giving us the transparency we need and showing us their hard work and sort of working for us and with us. It's a refreshing change and much appreciated. So I just wanted to say that. Bottom line is I speak primarily on the behalf of the Byward Market, but I am in touch with a lot of businesses citywide. And, small business really is in a bit of trouble. It's in decline. We're losing our homegrown businesses, our mom and pop shops, and these are the shops that really, brighten up our neighborhoods. It's nice to see it was nice to see a Saslov's meat market in the Byward market, but now, we don't have it anymore. And what are they replaced with? Well, maybe a pot shop or something like that. So we're losing these businesses, and it's a real concern for us. So, the 5:30 to 9:30 zone for us is a sweet spot. It's when we generate majority of our sales, and so it's a real incentive for customers to come and shop. So if you lose that incentive, you lose customers, you lose businesses, and you lose jobs. So there is that threat, and that's something that we all have to sort of be aware of when we're proposing parking measures and stuff like that. And I was just listening to the gentleman from the BIA, representing all the BIAs, and talking about the Glebe. The Glebe does have a parking lot, a big one, which is nice. But the Byward Market, our big parking lot that's in the center, is basically only half. Only half of it is usable. We need a new parking lot, and that would solve a lot of parking problems. And this parking lot has been talked about since the dawn of time, so it'd be nice to have that built. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But also we're losing. With the retail, I'm speaking on behalf of retail too. Retail is losing a lot of customers to the Costco, to the Loblaws, and they have parking lots. They have free parking, and that's part of the problem. So we really need to have really have to think about our customer base and the incentive to get them into the busier zones, the shopping zones where the mom and pop shops exist, like the Byward Market, the Glebe, Preston Street, and way beyond. But on that note, I'd also like to say it's good to see some consistency in the parking rules as well, citywide, where there's free parking in some spots, and like in the Byward Market where there's no free parking essentially. So, anyways, and yet I also like the idea of permitting the employees to park at a discounted rate and having areas blocked off for them. That'd be pretty good. And the 15-minute zone, it'd be nice actually to see that moved up to a 30-minute zone, because you have elderly and you have people with families who need to get in and get out. Sometimes 15 minutes isn't enough time. But hopefully we can all come to a pretty good agreement on these parking measures, and that makes everybody happy in the future. And thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. We do have a question from Councillor Plant.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And no, I did not pay Dave to say those nice things about me and the chair, although thank you, I appreciate it. I was just wondering, just for my knowledge and the committee's knowledge, what would you say is a bigger challenge, the parking situation or the social disorder situation right now for you in the Byward?
Well, I think that they're both right up there equally, to tell you the truth. And I've been as a member of the BAC and the BMDA, we've been focusing on the safety and security so much that I didn't realize how important parking is. But recently, over the last year or two, I've just really talking to the retailers and sort of just by walking around the market and being there, that's just I really have realized the importance of parking. And to give an example, I was at a volleyball tournament with my daughter, and I'm with 40, 50 other parents, and they all know, we have volleyball parties at the Grants, and they know where my business is. And the main theme when we're talking about the market with these parents was parking, and it was just sort of shocked me, So anyway, they're right up there together.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Great. And thank you again, David, for coming out today. It was great speaking with you in person and with the businesses in the area. Next up, we have Cassie Smith. Cassie Smith, I'm not sure if you're online or in person today. Hey, you're here today. Wonderful. Come on down. You're the next contestant. Great. We'll just get you to turn your microphone on, and you're no stranger to this place. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Chair, Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Cassie Smith, and I am here today on behalf of Enviro Center to express our support for the evening and weekend parking rate review. Our mission is to scope, design, deliver, and scale practical solutions to dramatically reduce climate emissions in our communities. Reducing transportation emissions, which account for more than 40% of community GHGs, is critical to achieving Ottawa's climate change master plan and ensuring a better future. I think the presentation has already explained that paid parking can reduce emissions. Directly, it reduces emissions from drivers searching for free or underpriced parking. In a famous study, Donald Shoup, a preeminent economist and parking researcher, found that in one 15-block area over 1 year, cruising for parking led to more than 1 million unnecessary kilometers driven, equivalent to 730 tons of CO2 emissions. Paid parking makes it easier for drivers to find a spot when and where they need it, leading to less driving. And the revenue generated from paid parking is used to support sustainable transportation, from park and rides to secure bike lockers, making it easier for people to choose these modes. Revenue also supports BIA initiatives that could help to make the most of sustainable transportation. Also, indirectly, paid parking begins to more accurately reflect the trade-offs that must be considered in decision-making about our public spaces. Street parking has never been free to provide for cities or communities. And with increasing pressures to act on emission reduction, climate resiliency, and housing, using prime public space for free car parking no longer makes sense. These public spaces could also be used to provide other modes of transportation, wider sidewalks, bike lanes, dedicated bus lanes. Could increase healthy biodiverse green spaces and trees that address the urban heat island effect, stormwater, and flooding. It could provide amenities that would make living in and visiting these locations more comfortable, enjoyable, and safe. Benches, shade, entertainment and activations, art, play structures, public bathrooms. And it can support small local businesses, patios, food trucks, pop-up shops, and markets. If these spaces are going to be used for car parking, it is understandable why users would be expected to pay. Privately owned parking operators understand the cost of providing parking, and they do not subsidize it. Just blocks away from the sites indicated in the report, private parking lots are already charging evening and weekend parking rates, far above what today's report proposes. At the Rideau Center, parking for 3 hours at any time, at any day, will cost you $14. At Lansdowne, $12 on weekends, $12 on weekdays, $15 on weekends, and more for some events. Another indirect way that paid parking reduces emissions is by starting to level the playing field with other forms of transportation. Ottawa, like all cities across North America, spent decades building for cars and subsidizing automobile costs, including free street parking. Change is going to be necessary for the city to see the shift outlined in the official plan of more than half of trips made by sustainable modes. Right now, we may assume that people choose to drive because they prefer driving, but it could simply be a rational decision about what costs them the most time and money based on these decades of decisions that have made car travel a fast and inexpensive per trip option. When a cost is applied for parking, some of these calculations may begin to change. For example, if my husband and I wanted to go out for dinner in the Byward Market, it would cost us $16 to take the O train or $2 to take our car, based on the CAA calculator for the cost of fuel, maintenance, and depreciation. But it would also feel like taking our car was free. Let me emphasize, transit, a public service that contributes significantly towards emission reduction, provides mobility for people of all ages, abilities, and incomes, is able to bring in a large number of potential customers, is not fare-free on weekends or Sundays. I think today's report demonstrates that staff have done their homework, they have analyzed, consulted over many years, and are suggesting incremental changes that will be monitored and regularly evaluated. They find in comparable Canadian cities that parking in the evening and on Sundays is not free. This issue has been studied and evidence is clear. Charging for parking is good economic, social, and environmental policy. We understand that some businesses are nervous about the change and encourage them to consider that this is an opportunity. There are going to be more customers coming to businesses by transit, bike, and walking, And these are customers that are not driving to Costco. There are lots of ways that you can lend your support to support these modes of transportation too, and consider how you can meet the needs of these customers. Thank you to staff for the report and recommendations, and committee members, I encourage you to vote in support. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. First, I'll go to committee members as per usual. Vice Chair Troster.
Hi, Cassie. Thanks for
Hello.
being here. I always appreciate your advocacy. So I think we're having a conversation here about perception versus data. And I know that you've studied this, so I'm very interested to hear from you. It sounds counterintuitive that metering parking for longer would actually make parking more available. What does the data say about that?
Yeah, there's an 800-page book called The High Cost of Free Parking, written by Donald Shoup. It has been restudied in many settings, analyzed over time, and everywhere they find that instituting paid parking, it makes it better for customers, it makes it better for businesses, it makes it better for neighborhoods, it's better for everyone. This really is a great solution, and the data on that is incredibly clear.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope you'll indulge me. I also read the book Paid Paradise, which was fantastic. And just this quote here where it says, basically free street parking. The quote is free street parking is a disaster. He says, how much downtown traffic is created by looking for parking? About a third. That's a lot of driving. Consider data from Westwood Village, a commercial neighborhood in Los Angeles. It took drivers 3 minutes to find parking, but multiply that by the hundreds of people coming and going, it added up to 35 hours of cruising for parking every hour. So it says this single neighborhood with 15 blocks of 470 underpriced parking meters was generating 3,600 extra miles of driving every single day. He says properly priced curb parking, on the other hand, and it becomes possible to find a space where you want it. When San Francisco started charging more for curb parking on its busiest streets a few years ago, parking citations actually went down, maybe because it was easier to park, or maybe because people thought they were getting something worth paying for. So anyway, I appreciate that. I think this compromise will give us an opportunity to really show the data that the sky will not fall and that it may actually make parking easier to obtain. And I really appreciate you bringing the environmental argument, because it's true. Cruising for parking is a significant source of emissions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Committee member Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cassie, for your delegation. Thank you for also bringing Donald Shoup into the room. I'm sure, and Scott, smile, because like any expert on parking, Scott will recognize Donald Shoup, another great book that the Urban Book Club has brought to the forefront. I just want to, I appreciate that Councillor Troster is drilling in on the fact that what we want to do here is, ask whether we're concerned about myth or concerned about facts and data. And it sounds like what you're saying here is that, as Donald Shoup demonstrated, paid parking will lead to greater turnover, which can be to the benefit of businesses. And so all we're really debating here is the high cost of free parking on any city, including the city of Ottawa. If all of our commercial parking lots are understandably charging for parking because it comes at a cost and they need to recoup those costs, then it's not within our mandate as a city to provide free parking, especially when that free parking may come to the cost of business activity. So I'd love it if the city can focus on reducing its GHG emissions, which is a pretty darn key core principle of ours, as well as supporting our local businesses by putting in place this more paid parking. So thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Plant.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cassie. As a fellow Shoupnista, I encourage everyone, if you are on Facebook, they have a great Facebook page for the Shoupnistas cult, as I like to call us. And it has parking from all over the world, data from all over the world. It's really interesting. But I was just wondering, because I think we're having kind of two parallel conversations here with the businesses that are coming to talk about, how this affects their businesses and how people are not coming downtown to shop. So would it be fair to say that Enviro Center would advocate for also paid parking outside of the downtown core?
I think that the approach that the city is taking to continue to study that and to make recommendations based on what they're seeing in the data and from analysis, that we would support that, and are happy to see that the parking in Westboro and Wellington Village will be added this year. I think it's important to keep abreast of all of the changing patterns in our city.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Plant, and thank you, Cassie, for coming out today. Next on our delegation list, we have Brian Leahy. Brian? Oh, wonderful. No, you just hit the button right there, Mr. Leahy, and you're no stranger to this place or to the city, so you have 5 minutes. You're good? Great, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. Our company owns commercial real estate in the Byward market, and my comments today are directed at the big picture in the Byward market. That's a specific area of it's our interest, not just as a landowner or property owner, but I love the Byward market. I want to see it thrive. Parking revenue is important, but maintaining high property values and therefore collecting massive tax revenue is more important to the city's budget. High property values are a reflection of above average commercial rents, and those rents are derived from ongoing, very successful business operations. It's in everyone's interest, therefore, to ensure that commercial success in the market, and one way to make that happen is consult and listen to the business owners on a regular basis. An issue involving parking should not be decided based on a staff report unless the business communities have been consulted and we accept that they, more than a consulting firm from afar, may know what's best for their ongoing growth and success. I just listened to staff description of the consultation process. I think that was with the BIA, which is no longer in existence, but something may be wrong with that process, because the news of this increase hit our business owners. It seemed to like a bolt out of the blue, and so this is the reason I'm here speaking for them. Parking is the #1 issue in the market. 2/3 of the clientele drive to and park in the market to shop and to dine. Most of the restaurant employees drive to work. This is most important in the winter, and the winter is when the market needs their help. The market thrives in the summer. In the winter, it's a real struggle. Bicycles aren't an option in the winter. The complete economic implications of this should be fully understood before we act. The business owners that have contacted us oppose the extension of paid parking into the evening. Their customers have many choices, and free parking is one of the things that entices them to the market. Feeding a meter, worrying about a ticket is a big negative. We would like to see a concerted effort to provide more street parking in the market and more underground parking. We fully support more free parking, and I agree, 30-minute, as Dave suggested, in areas where we have retail operations. Not as important to restaurants, a little bit for their takeout business, but retailers have to have convenient parking. No one is going to run in to pick up a dress that's ready if they have to look for park in a parking garage that's hundreds of meters away. The BMDA is just beginning to work with the business community in many of these issues, but it's in its early stages. I'm not aware of any consultation that they have had on this issue of parking. We'd like to see the newly created BMDA, work with business owners and become the governing authority for all aspects of the market. It's a little bit discouraging to see another department in the city being given priority and having such a, what I think, a large impact on the market. Parking revenue is important, but we should be doing everything that we can to support and grow one of the nation's most significant historic market areas. I think that's more important. We ask that you pause on this extension until we've examined all the economic consequences. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Leahy. And I think you've touched on a couple of things. We'll have questions to staff later. You've kind of highlighted, I think, what I'm hearing is when it comes to the Byward Market District, I think there's confusion, and we'll confirm some of this later on, because as you heard during the presentation, many of them were consulted. I find it odd that you guys didn't even know about it. And I think that's a problem. And that's why I went out and actually spoke directly to the businesses with council colleagues to hear it on the ground. So I want to thank you for highlighting that. I think it's very important. I see no questions for you today, sir. Thank you for coming out. Next up, we have Todd Brown. Todd, oh, great. You're here in person today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members, for taking the time to listen to us. My name is Todd Brown. I represent 28 restaurants that operate in the Byward Market, Elgin Street, and Westboro areas. Those include Pure Kitchen Group, El Camino Group, 18 Group, Ottawa Venues, and Clock Tower Group. We're in a really tough time in the economy for restaurants. Consumers are not willing to pay more money. In the past couple of years, inflation has caused us to increase our prices. Last year, with a 10% increase across the board in our establishments, $2 million worth of labor dollars were lost. That's how much money was lost to our employees. I believe this, what you're proposing, the 2 hours, can potentially cost $16 per person who wants to eat out. The average person spends $50 in a 2 hour and 15-minute time period. You're looking at a 16% increase to the cost of going out dining. From my math, from what I'm seeing, my businesses alone will lose another $3 million in labor dollars to my employees. This is going to devastate the business. And I'm a small portion of these businesses. This could actually hurt employees to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. There's been no assessment of this happening. The consumer is at its limit on what it can afford to pay. By you adding additional costs to going out on something that for 2 decades or more has been free, you're going to add 16% potentially to their bill. They won't be able to afford it. They will just go out less often, and that's what will happen. There won't be turnover. We see it every time we increase our prices. We lose the number of times that customers come and spend dollars with us. So if you do go forward with this, the employees are going to take the brunt of it. They are going to feel it, and some businesses will fail. So this is not a light issue. This isn't something that people are going to accept, that it's going to help turn over vehicles, more people are going to come. It's just not going to happen. Plus, as Dave Mangano mentioned, the sweet spot. They come to us from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. They're coming for 3 hours to dine. There's going to be no additional turnover. They're coming for that 2 hours and 15 minutes. There's no turnover caused by what you're doing. It's strictly a tax or a tariff on our customers and will increase the expense of them dining out, which will cause them to dine out less, which will cost jobs. Don't really need to say more on that. I'm not in agreement with any of these increases. My employees certainly are scared. They don't want to lose more money. They've lost it over the last couple of years. They've been through a pandemic. these are, and I'm not talking university students. I'm talking people that this is their career. And the majority of employees that work for me, this is their career. And you need to think about that and think about how that will affect them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to what I have to say.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, sir, for coming in and delegating. And I definitely do appreciate hearing the concerns from the business community. And I think that there's, good reason that the business community, which, as you say, has faced numerous challenges over the past years, that there's apprehension over any change. And I don't begrudge that at all. Of course, at the same time, and if I believe you said that you own or represent 20 restaurants.
I'm a partner in all those restaurants. That's correct.
Congratulations. That's amazing. I have to assume then that you have counterparts, business colleagues in other cities. And I'll ask again, because in the staff presentation, they made reference to the fact that Ottawa is the minority, within the minority of cities that have weekday parking up until 9 p.m., 10 p.m. in some cities, weekend parking up until evenings. And those cities have the same kind of business districts that we have and are, I presume, they're still having turnover, they're still thriving. And so do you have any kind of conversations with your counterparts in other cities that have the kind of parking that we are contemplating putting in place to see whether or not they are better off, worse off than we are in this kind of state?
Sure, I'll comment to that. You can't compare Ottawa to Montreal and Toronto. Both Montreal and Toronto have arenas in those areas that charge parking. They have 200 to 300 events a year, driving 50,000 people into that area. They have high density. They have amazing public transportation. So there's no way you can compare Ottawa to that. You can maybe compare it to Edmonton, maybe compare it to Hamilton. You cannot compare Ottawa to Montreal and Toronto.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And of course, one other thing, because you mentioned those cities have those other attractions that pull in customers. And one long-term consideration of if and when we don't have free parking in these areas like the Byward Market, when you try to imagine what you might do with that space, what a city can do with that space, and what you can do with that space is put in place any number of measures that might attract people that weren't attracted otherwise. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Avenue Mont-Royal in Montreal, but what they did there over a span of many years was they went from testing out car free to implementing it, and it has an amazing impact on those businesses, generating so much traffic, foot traffic, other kinds of traffic, that the businesses are thriving even after they had apprehension. But not only that, by freeing up that space, they put in so many new public amenities in that public realm that it just draws in new kinds of customers.
So there was a little test of that in the Byward Market this winter.
Yeah.
Where they had kept William Street closed for the winter, and they put in a skating rink, and they thought that would draw people. And it did the opposite. It made it tougher for the businesses to do business. Everybody's sales went down. And the minute they reopened the street, people came down, it was thriving again, there was life again in the area. So,
yeah, and who is
so
behind that?
it takes a lot more than just thinking you can close a street and you're going to draw people.
I appreciate that. And who is behind that initiative?
The Byward Market District Authority.
Right. And one thing that I understand a concern about that kind of project, anytime you do any kind of pilot project, if it might not be, perhaps well thought out, but at the same time, you have to give these changes time to breathe. Also, so I kind of liken Byward Market to Granville Island in Vancouver,
Yes.
An isolated area geographically set off from the rest of the city. And Granville Island has always and continues to thrive. And on Granville Island, where I lived for many years, there is paid parking up until 9 p.m. And many of the city's high-end restaurants are down there. And I believe they're doing well, even with that paid parking.
Well, again, look at the density of Vancouver. It's enormous. We do not have that density. And there aren't even plans in the work to get that density. From talking to builders at this point, builders aren't even looking at new projects. What's in the ground in the downtown core and high rises is what we're going to get. No builders right now are looking at more density. So thinking that we're going to become a high density city, it's, it's decades away.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Plant.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Todd, for being here. And I know you literally walk the walk. You walk everywhere. You may live in the best neighborhood in the city. I won't say where, but and in the best board in the city. My question though is, and I just want to make a quick correction to the comments that Councillor Devine was saying to support Todd's point, is that Mont-Royal, Granville Island are great. They're wonderful. They're lovely. St. Lawrence Market, it's all lovely. They do not have 3 injection sites, 800 shelter beds, 2 safe supply pharmacies, 3 soup kitchens, 2-day programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That composition of social services is the highest in Canada in one 500-meter stretch. And so when we talk about the challenges of the Byward Market, this is part and parcel of all that. The parking is seen as a layering on top of all of these challenges. Now, Todd, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I'm assuming you would sort of agree that that's what one of the things that differentiates the Byward from all of these other areas. And so my question for you is, do you have the number?
Councillor Plant, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry.
There's a bit of exercise in what you're putting there. If I could ask you to put the question to the delegation, please.
Oh yeah, I was doing that. Okay, sorry. Do most people who come to your restaurants, whether they be on Elgin, whether they be in the Byward, are they coming just to like by foot? Are they coming by car? Are they coming by bike? Do you have that information?
Well, the information that I have seen, which was a downtown reader study, is that over 70% of people that come to the Byward Market to spend money come by car. As you pointed out, live in Sandy Hill. I walk everywhere. I believe in biking, but nobody uses the bike lanes. I would love to see everyone biking to Elgin Street, to Westboro, to the Byward Market, but I walk by them every day and they're empty. And the more we build, the emptier they are. So it's disheartening to see. I would love to see it happen, but we are a city that uses cars. Our customers want to drive. I was shocked when this came up, because I reached out to our employees to get an idea of how many of them drive to work, bike to work, or take public transport. Over 90% of them drive. That means on a Friday or Saturday night, there's over 1,000 parking spots being taken up by my employees in the Byward Market, Elgin, and Westboro. So parking is needed. And this increase in costs is going to also tax my employees that suffer more than any other employee through this pandemic. This is really, you really have to look at the economic impact you're going to have on them.
Great. And I don't see the councillor online. Video is off. Great. Thank you for coming out today, Todd. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Chris Pierre.
Hello, Councillor Tierney. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Committee members. My name is Chris Pierre. I'm the owner of a firm called the Key North Group. We're based in the Byward Market. I'm actually here, though, as a representative of the Business Advisory Committee of the BMDA. In that capacity, I've had the opportunity to speak with small businesses in the Byward Market. You've already heard from a few. And one of the things, and I don't know how I got myself into this, was addressing the issue of parking and traffic concerns in the Byward Market. And the concerns that business owners have include a lot of things around parking. It's the number 2 issue or number 1 issue next to public safety. But it is not going to be resolved by implementing paid parking in the evenings, nor is it going to be resolved by implementing paid parking on Sundays. Right now, the business community has indicated to me that they have issues around confusing signage, aggressive bylaw enforcement, parking spots consumed for long before and long after events, and the alternative methods of travel like LRT results in sometimes an unenjoyable experience at the Rideau Street station. So even those people who choose to take alternative transportation methods are deterred in some cases. The report tabled by the Parking Services Group highlights some of the benefits to business through increased turnover. That may be the case in other areas of the city, but we are not hearing that from the business community in the Byward market. There's no business that I have talked to that says that implementing paid parking on the evenings or weekends will help. In fact, they are worried about increased bylaw tickets because of the increased paid parking. Another thing to consider is that there's already 2-hour limit on Sundays in the Byward market. It's enforced regularly by bylaw. So the concern with respect to turnover is already being addressed. Okay. As far as the benefits from parking revenue, the market has seen very little benefit from the parking fees that are generated there, save and except a little bit of investment in the infrastructure in the parking garages and the implementation of secure bike racks. The report does not indicate how an increase in parking revenue would benefit the businesses of the Byward market. There is no mention of increased parking infrastructure, and there's no other indications of how those things would, or how that increased revenue would benefit the market. I had a number of points in my talk about all the other issues that the Byward market has faced and why it's unique within the city. I think those have been covered by my colleagues and by Councillor Plant. So in closing, all I would ask the council and this committee to consider is that there are various challenges both with traffic and non-traffic issues in the Byward market. Everyone has a desire to see the Byward market thrive again. And in terms of data points, business sentiment is an important data point to consider. Whether or not people view that their customers are going to come back, whether or not people view it as an important place to invest, those are important factors to consider, and I don't see it represented here. And then finally, the lack of any clear benefit to the Byward market businesses from the extra revenue generated from the parking is also a major concern. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for coming out today. I made a couple of notes of what you mentioned here today, and I'll have questions for staff for that, but no further questions, so we'll cut you free today. Thank you for coming out. Next up, we have Samantha Sigler. Good morning, Samantha. Oh, you just hit it one more time and it'll come back on the red light. Perfect.
Great,
So you have
thank you.
5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Tierney, for your work. Thank you to the committee. I also am a member of the Business Advisory Committee to the Byward Market District Authority, and Chris and I volunteer together, and I also work with the properties group. So I have the benefit of seeing this from both sides, both from the sides of, to give you some context, we manage close to 20 commercial properties in the market, and we have close to 30 commercial tenants in my employment, and I also see it in my volunteer role as a member of the BAC. And Chris and I can tell you that we receive emails from businesses in the Byward market almost on a daily basis complaining about parking issues. It is the number one issue for us in the Byward market, I think in tandem with the security issues. The businesses are continuing to struggle with the repercussions of COVID, the lack of daytime trade because of the loss of office workers. They rely heavily on the evening trade. And as a member of the Business Advisory Committee, we have not had any consultation between us and the Byward Market District Authority on the potential impact that these changes could have on the businesses. We personally don't think that it's prudent to roll out a change like this without really consulting the businesses. We did have the benefit of the presentation by Mr. Caldwell to the BAC, but unfortunately there was no consultation between the BAC and the Byward Market District Authority. To compound that, Byward no longer has a business improvement area, and so we don't have a body that can advocate for the businesses. The businesses and the customers that will be penalized by this are local businesses, the ones that we're trying to support more of, the ones that we're trying to increase the number of. If the city is concerned, and there is a concern, there is not enough parking, but if there is not enough parking, then I would really encourage the city to look at constructing more parking. We have a prime opportunity right now to construct underground parking at the 70 Clarence Street parking lot, which was earlier referenced as being a large portion of that parking lot cannot be used due to some structural issues. I think that if we were to tear down that garage, build a ground level plaza, and build multiple layers of underground parking, it would, one, solve the need for more parking, and two, it would give us a purpose-built plaza or purpose-built piece of infrastructure to allow the Byward Market District Authority to put on events that would draw people into the market. We can't look at this in a vacuum. We have to consider that there are multiple elements that are at play here. The other issue is that the Byward Market District Authority and the businesses are competing for the same parking spaces. The BMDA takes up a number of spaces for their vending stations, and the businesses themselves need those parking spaces. As I believe Brian Lahi mentioned earlier, some of the things that we, the Business Advisory Committee, would like to see is 30-minute free parking in the market. And another thing that I think that the committee should consider is that if you're going to increase the hours of paid parking, you might push more parking into the residential neighborhoods that are behind the Byward Market, Hintonburg, Willington West, and you're going to see more cars parking there because they're going to be looking for free parking. And I don't know if that's the intent that, you know, the committee would really like to see, is pushing more cars into heavily, residential areas. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thanks for, I disturbed you last evening while you're with your family, so thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
Discussing.
Appreciate it.
We do have a question from Councillor Devine.
Hello. Thank you for coming. And again, it is really valuable to me to hear echoes of the concerns of the business community. And I do hear, a theme repeating, which is concerns, and I think they can be separated, concerns not just for, customers, but concerns for employees. So going back, when you talk about, the desire to have either more parking in the Byward Market or at least parking for employees, if there was a way that, let's say when we talk about on-street parking, if we do go in the direction where on-street parking was made paid parking with the intention that that be for customer turnover, if that was done in tandem with some kind of new system, some kind of new rate, where employees of the Byward Market, provided they're willing to walk a block or two, if they could have a segregated parking area for them, let's say in a parking garage, where there's an amount of parking apportioned for employees, they show a permit, I'm an employee, and that could be discounted parking for longer than 2 hours, would that kind of system serve employees of the Byward Market?
It could, but I think that the message that you've heard from other delegations here today is that there really needs to be consultation with the businesses to determine whether that could work. I think in theory, it might be a good idea, but I don't know. And so I think that should be investigated.
Absolutely. And it's not like I can't wave a wand to make it happen today anyways. But the other interesting point that you raised, when you were saying that like there was a delegate before that was speaking about, so if we're going to have all this paid parking, but where's the demonstration that revenues from that paid parking would create new parking infrastructure? And you're calling for the creation of new parking infrastructure, i.e. that underground parking lot. Well, guess what revenue would pay for that? It would be the paid parking that might come for Byward Market. And so ironically, you may be pushing against the very thing that could be funding the very thing that you want. And so if hypothetically there were paid parking in Byward Market, that could fund the very kind of infrastructure that you're looking to get.
Sure. My dream is to take the $10 million that the city has budgeted to fix the 70 Clarence Parking Street garage to take that and put it into what would be an approximate $20 million project, which we have had quoted by a contractor that we work with. It would cost $20 million to demolish 70 Clarence Street, to build multiple levels of underground parking and create the ground level infrastructure for a plaza. And you could take $10 million that the city has budgeted to maintain 70 Clarence, put it into the construction of this dream, and then borrow the other $10 million from the Canada Infrastructure Bank or another private bank. And I do understand that we're here today to talk about rolling out parking in the evenings and on the weekends, but we can't look at this in a vacuum. We have to look at it in the greater context of what, for example, we are seeing in the Byward market. Just this morning, I received an email from a business called Stunning talking about how there are major parking issues again. And we get these emails daily from businesses. We need more parking, but businesses, there is a perception. And as Chris said, that perception is an excellent data point. There will be repercussions if you continue to charge for parking on the weekends and the evenings. So I think that all needs to be looked in together.
Great, thank you. And thank you for, I might want to follow up with you on that idea of your 10 million, 20 million thing, but thank you for that.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, forgive me, Councillor Plant has questions.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Samantha. It's really nice to see you again. I do have a question. You said that the activation has taken away spots. Do you know how many spots have been taken away? I heard it wasn't that many, but I could be wrong.
Significant. I think Pat Nicastro could help us with the data because he sees that on a daily basis. But what happens with the activations is that the spots are reserved and then they're not freed up if there is no vendor.
Right.
One of the complaint, for example, in the email that I received this morning was the vendors, vendors are taking up multiple parking spots and then saving the parking spots for their family and friends. So you'll have one vendor, let's say 3 vendors taking up 15 spots. Was
Got it.
The email that I received this morning.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Samantha. Now we have our next delegation, Stephen Bechta.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, councillors. Thank you very much for having me to this delegation and for hearing some feedback from businesses and others in the community. I recognize how much effort went into this study and this proposal, and especially the desire on the part of the city to improve business for our local businesses. It means a lot to us. And I also wanted to say I appreciate the amendment from moving from 9 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. with the idea of supporting nighttime businesses, which have been really disproportionately burdened with this original proposal. That's great. And, Councillor Tierney, thank you for reaching out when you saw that I registered to speak today in order to hear those concerns and try to understand the broader context of this. I really appreciate it. So my suggestion, just to be clear, I see this proposal as 2 parts. One is the paid daytime part in 20 different zones, and then one is the nighttime paid part in only 8 of those 25 different zones. And dropping it to 7:30 from 9 p.m. is great. It shaves an hour and a half off of a 12.5-hour addition for many places like Westboro. I would like to suggest moving that amendment to 5:30 instead of 7:30 and then putting Sunday paid parking back on the amendment. So that would be my proposal. I would also like to find a way around the 2-hour maximum that still stands. And this is the really challenging part for my businesses and for businesses in the nighttime area, because many of our guests need more than 2 hours. By the time you park and walk back and forth, we're down to 1 hour and 45 minutes. Groups of 4 or more in fine dining restaurants, mid-tier restaurants, bars, shows, they need more than 2 hours. And right now it's illegal in the city of Ottawa to go and re-up your parking. You can't, you have to, by law, move your car a minimum of 300 meters from the original spot if you have expired your maximum parking amount. So in Montreal, for instance, I know that we talked about this a lot earlier. You can, and the night mayor pointed this out to me when I spoke to him about this, you can re-up your parking from your seat in your restaurant. Oh, okay, well, I'm staying longer than 2 hours. I'm going to add another hour or an hour and a half on there. We don't have that ability. We don't have pay by app, and nor do we have a bylaw that allows people to stay in a spot past the maximum, even if they pay. So just keeping that in mind. Again, I really want to focus on these 8 of 25 zones that are included in this, because unfortunately what happens is that it creates a large barrier to entry for those businesses only in those 8 zones, where it encourages people to go to a different zone because, as Todd mentioned earlier, there's a tax that has been put on those 8 zones, only in those 8 zones. So I know that fairness was a huge part of what this study was looking at and trying to equalize. I was an advocate when I was on the board of the Westboro BA for daytime parking to make it fair with the rest of the city and to encourage that turnover during the day. Nighttime, there is very few businesses that are open and do business, but for those that do, they do the bulk of their business at night, whether it be gyms or restaurants or bars or shows, the Legion, you know, there's many businesses like this. And so it disproportionately affects them if we have that 2-hour limit and if we put that tax on to a very small number of businesses within our community. And all it is going to do is continue to hollow out the downtown core by pushing people, especially people who book large group events, for instance, to the suburbs where there is abundant and free parking. And I know that no one around this table wants to continue this hollowing out of the downtown core. We need people down here. So I would encourage someone on the committee to move another amendment to change the earlier one to 5:30 end time for all zones, all 25 zones, and to add back paid Sunday parking to balance off the revenues or the fairness all around. Thank you. I'd love to take your questions.
Great. Thank you for that. Councillor Troster.
Hi, thanks for being here.
you.
And your restaurant is, of course, in my ward, and I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
But I will gently push back that for your restaurant on Elgin Street, there is the City Hall parking lot right across the
No.
street.
Back to, so we have 3 restaurants.
Yeah.
Becta on Elgin, Play in the Market, and
Yes.
Gazelle in Westboro. Becta has validated underground parking. This doesn't impact Becta's guests at all.
Okay. So
This impacts Gazelle and Play, but all of the other businesses in those zones. Hopefully I'm speaking for more than just myself.
for sure. For sure. And I will also say, I'm going to ask these questions to staff because I believe we're actually moving to pay by app or to pay by license soon. And I think your point is well taken about the ability to extend paid parking if your meal isn't finished yet. Like, I think that's something we should definitely talk about. But I will also gently push back because in zones where we're over 80% capacity, the data is showing that people are coming anyway.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, for example, I had dinner on Preston Street with my elderly parents a few days ago. I would normally walk or bike because I live in the neighborhood, but we drove because I was with my parents. I paid in a private lot because there were no city parking spots available anyway.
Yep.
So the goal here is to move more of your customer base to be able to come to your businesses, and the data shows that this will work. I understand the skepticism. This is why I like the idea of going to 7:30 and coming back in a year and a half and taking a look at the hard data from that. Because I think unless we try it, we don't know what the real impact would be. Because business owners are saying is our perception is that this is not going to work. And all of the data from every other major city that has done this says, yes, it's going to work. And the only way we're going to know is if we try. And so respectfully, I'm not interested in changing the amended motion. I think for the average person who come and dines at your restaurant too, if street parking ends at 7:30, their car can stay there. It can stay all night. So they could come for a 6 o'clock reservation, pay for an hour and a half. And if they end up sitting there till 9, they're not going to be penalized. It would be more of an issue with the extension to 9 p.m. and the 2-hour limit. Like, I think that's worth looking at when this comes back in 2027. But I do want to say, I hear you, and that's why we put this motion forward to adjust things. it's really tricky because I will also gently push back and say, for example, when it comes to like bike lanes in major Canadian cities, like in Toronto, when they put in the Bloor Street bike lane, the businesses opposed it, street traffic and business improved in that location. So sometimes what we think is not going to work may work. And the only way to know is to try. And I think this is like a pretty time limited period of time. And it kind of straddles the dinner hour such that it might present less of an imposition.
Appreciate. Can I rebut a couple of those points? Thank you. So I want to talk specifically about the 80% mark that you spoke about. So Wellington West came in just under 80%, and our part of Westboro, so Richmond West, I think it's called, came in just over.
Right.
So suddenly our guests are paying, $6 to $10 more for their meal than going to supply and demand, for instance. I'm looking at fairness, and that's why the 8 of the 25 zones is where I really want to keep this focus on. And there was a lot of really great points that you made. And the important part also to note about Westboro, they've never had paid parking. So first new zone in 20 years, but to go from 0 to 100, it seems disproportionate to me. I know that so much of time and effort was put into this report around fairness. And again, that's where I want to stress that I would suggest the 530 for all 25 zones as fairness. Because if you start singling out 8 instead of 25, simply because of a few cars that could go flip it either way, the 80% to 78%, then that's where I think that the perception could be that there isn't that blanket fairness that I think everyone is looking for.
Okay. Well, I think this invites us to basically reevaluate in about 18 months to see what the data shows us, right? Because we could withdraw, we could change, we could extend it to all 25. We could say, no, it doesn't make sense in these 8 zones. But, sometimes you have to try things to see if they work. And the goal is better circulation and better foot traffic for your businesses, not less.
But
right?
only for 8 zones.
Well, no, and also in areas like Hindenburg that are getting paid parking for the first time ever, right?
Right, absolutely,
Yeah.
but not nighttime.
Right.
So recognizing that it's only for 8 zones that we're talking
We'll
about
be able
here.
to measure though. It might be for night.
So I appreciate it, but sorry,
folks,
point, and
we don't allow debate.
My
It's
apologies.
entering into that area, so I always like to keep everyone happy. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. We could all just go have lunch at your restaurant, watch the debate carry on. And speaking
Please
of
come
lunch,
on down. We've got spots today.
Yeah, neither can I. And I got to tell you, hearing about all these fabulous restaurants an hour before lunch when I'm on a diet is killing me. I got a salad waiting for me back in the office, and this is nasty. Thank you for your presentation, sir. I appreciate the concerns you raise. I don't think I would be supporting your interesting amendment because I'm not sure if I'm supporting the Troster amendment in the first place. I think I'm looking to support the staff recommendations and see what comes of it. But the point that you raised that I'm genuinely intrigued by is your comparison to Montreal. And if that is true, because for that customer to re-up, if they're like, you know what, I want to have the creme brulee and they're going to re-up for another 20 minutes, if that's not the same thing as re-upping for another 2 hours. And I don't think that kind of re-up would necessarily impact the kind of turnover we're trying to get from this. And that kind of innovation, that kind of modernization of our practices is something I would definitely like to support. So I'll wait till staff questions because I want to hear what staff's plans are for that kind of system change. But so thank you for planting the seed about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you for that. And just one quick question. I don't see any of these committee members looking to move anything. I've been straw polling. It took a lot to get to this point. I'll be very frank with you. We're dealing with a lot of cats. I know I've been the lovely face for this, but at the same time, that's why I've reached out personally to get feedback. Have you looked at, when we talk about the Sundays, which I've heard from a lot of people, the brunch crowd, the church crowd, we've seen a big focus on employees. What are your employees saying about you advocating to say paid Sundays is fine, where they would still have to pay?
So the bulk of our employees take public transit or walk. So I can't speak to other business owners, but the bulk of ours either pay, Becta is different because they can get validated underground parking at a pretty reasonable rate. But for those that play in Gazeligan, the Byward Market, and in Westboro, most of them take public transit or walk. So from a staffing point, that's not it. So I recognize this will be a burden. Brunch at Gazelig is our busiest service period, Saturdays and Sundays, and this will have a huge impact on that. And I recognize that, but I also recognize it's more important to protect the evenings when we have large groups like pharmaceutical groups or birthday parties or graduations, and they come, there's no way that they're finishing in under 2 hours. If they arrive at 5 or 5:30, they literally have to go and move their car by 300 meters to be able to stay with their loved ones or with their business group.
Yeah, and just to get this back on track and be cognizant of everyone's time, because I know there's questions for staff. So I've heard from many people, I think employee parking has been kind of the discussion as a majority here today.
It's not much of an issue for me.
So you have no concern about the employee parking situation on this?
I recognize change is necessary, as I advocated for with paid parking when I was a member of the Westboro BIA. Judy, by the way, from the Westboro BIA did send a letter in today, wasn't able to be here. So I'd encourage all the committee members to read that.
Yeah, it's in our drive.
Yeah.
No, I just want to ask and see if you've communicated with your employees, because I think even between now and council, if there is something that were to happen, or if that discussion did take place, I think it would behoove us not to speak to the churches and speak to a lot of the people, because this is why we've asked staff to do this since 2023, is to go out and look at all those aspects of things. So I thought Sunday being back in free was a huge win, but apparently it's not. So
Nighttimes in those 8 zones is more important than Sundays in 25 zones. And I think it speaks to the fairness point that I was trying to make earlier.
Sure enough. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out today.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Zach from the Byward Market District Authority, the person of the hour. So while we're waiting for Zach to arrive, I will go to Steve Minook. Steve, where's your Vikings jersey, man? So you dressed up today then?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
You know how excited I am about this season?
Yeah, 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi, for you who don't know me, I'm Steve Minook. I at one time was chair of the Byward Market BIA, and I was chair of Ecobia for its inception for almost 3 years. I was going to speak on a lot of issues, but they've basically been covered by everybody, and I don't like to take up time and repeat. I really appreciate, and I've spoke here for 25 years. I always appreciate the counselors and their time in looking after these issues, and especially staff. There's a lot of work. They're pulled between us businesses and the counselors and the other people of the city. What frustrates me a lot is the process, and I think that's what a lot of times I've spoken on this is we talk about consultation, and the reason we're hearing all these good ideas that I think a lot of you on the committee have not heard is because sometimes the consultation is confusing or misunderstood, and people don't know who represents who. And, you know, maybe this isn't the time or place, but it has to be changed. And a lot of times when it says up there that people are consultated, like it says that Ecobia was, and the Byward Market Authority was consultated, is that it doesn't mean that they agree. Because talking to everybody on both those boards, they do not agree with this. So when it says up there that staff have talked to them, it doesn't mean that they've agreed. And then I've dealt with this issue for over 25 years, and we've talked about evening parking and Sunday parking. We've went through this. And when we had the Byward Market BIA, we were always somewhat in favor of Sunday parking because we know that our Sunday parking is taken up by when it's free on Sundays, it's taken up by Rideau Center patrons and staff, and we lose a lot of our parking on Sundays. But one of the concerns we always had is where the money goes. And again, today, listening to this, I know Councillor Devine, you brought it up about the money and it could go back to help parking. But in two parts of this presentation, I've seen where the money is going to go to bike lanes and all of these other things. So it's always concerned us as businesses that the parking money that comes from our businesses then goes to other applications and not back to parking. So it is a big concern of ours that it doesn't go back, because we have good ideas about our parking garage. We've had the same ideas for 25 years. We've talked about the parking money going back there and it's never happened. So you can understand our concern as businesses is when we're told that these things are going to happen and then they don't happen. We talk about turnover. And again, I don't know if this is true, but I'll bring it up from what I hear about from some staff and stuff, that it doesn't create a lot of turnover. And one of the reasons is from what I understand, on the 2-hour parking, you can go get a ticket from one of the machines and put it in your car. Then you can use the app from the machine after that and get another 2 hours. And if you have a number from another machine, you can use another machine again and you can get 6 hours. So it doesn't really create turnover. And that's, I think, there's studies everywhere else about it does, but I know a lot of people that get away from the turnover. So I guess my point is I appreciate all the hard work that everybody's done, but I don't think that we've really looked deep enough into this issue and the effects of the issue. And I'm asking for, if we do have to go to Sunday, I think Sunday, and a couple of people have brought it up, is a lesser of the evil. But besides that, I'd like a little bit more study on this and us to go. And as you can see by how many people are speaking on this issue, that I understand there was some consultation or some presentations, but I don't think there was enough feedback on this issue for everybody to understand all the issues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephen. When it gets to questions, the staff will ask for clarification where that money can be spent. I think that's the other confusion. People see this as a cash grab. The city's getting the cash. Well, we can't even touch it. So it's no skin off my nose. It's trapped in a parking fund. But I will ask staff to go ahead and explain specifically what that money can be used for. But thank you for coming out today, and we'll continue our discussions. Seeing no questions, on to the next delegation. Oh, Zachary's in the room. Zach.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the time today. I hope you can all hear me. Sorry for the technical difficulties logging in. I appreciate the time of the committee and everybody's time to show up and discuss this important issue. The Byward Market District Authority was really established and started operating in 2024 as a group that has a responsibility really boiled down to enhancing the visitor experience. And with that, it comes balancing a lot of interests from communities, one of those being the business community, obviously the residential community, the visitor community, all those groups. And balance can be challenging. I'm here today because we did receive a lot of feedback about it. And there were a few consultation sessions that I know Scott and the team can sort of validate that went out the door and conversations that were had. Now, staff have a challenging role of taking those pieces and making the best decision and of course, or recommendation, and of course, the council and committee votes on those. But what I want to do today is echo really the concern around the timing of such implementation. There has been a lot that the business community, restaurant, retail have gone through in the last number of years. And I think what you've heard here is there's a variety of opinions on how to address those issues. But for businesses in Byward, I can confirm parking is the #1 concern that they have. And so what this motion looks to do is to create more turnover. And that's the lever that the city staff are recommending. But again, where I come at this from the businesses that we've heard from and from our business advisory committee, the timing on this just doesn't land. It's going to likely provide perception issues and branding issues for the district at a time when they're combating with a number of issues related to drawing people here. Now, we also understand, and I think it's important to acknowledge, and I'm not saying density isn't important in our downtown cores, but the city of Ottawa has continually expanded its urban boundary, really leading to an environment of the car and driving of its importance. So I can appreciate the concern that's raised in terms of folks and their customers traversing what is a large city. The last point that I'll leave you with, and I think it's been talked about quite a bit, but I would encourage as a next step to try and address these issues, really looking at what's possible within that Municipal Parking Act and how those dollars can be applied in the areas in which they're levied from. Byward Market, whether it be through ticket revenue, parking revenue, property tax, commercial tax, really does fund the continued expansion of Ottawa and by a result, increased car use. So I'll leave you with this. Again, I want to thank all the businesses that showed up. I think this is exactly what committees are for, and I think you're hearing directly from them. But I think the timing of the implementation on this lever to turn over more parking needs to be considered as of the detrimental impacts it can have on that perception piece. But I am optimistic that we'll get some further data over the next 17 or 18 months and review this issue again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for coming out today, Zach. Seeing no questions today, I thank you for that. And again, look forward to working with you further to ensure we have stronger communications in the future. But I do want to thank you for taking part today. Now we'll go to questions to staff. I'm sure we'll have quite a few, so I'll just wait for members to raise their hands. And thank you, staff. Maybe while we're waiting, can we clarify right out of the gate while I'm waiting for some hands to go up in regards to where this money goes to and what it could be spent on? I think there's a lot of confusion on that, and I think we have to really clarify that. This does not go to general revenues. I can't take this and build a park. I can't take it and put up some fancy swing set. I can't do any of that stuff, correct?
Chair, that's correct. The parking fee revenues are considered a user fee. So under the Municipal Act, they need to be spent in relation to what they're collected for. So we have two tests when considering where we can apply these funds. The first is that there must be an alignment with the municipal park management strategy. And the second is that there must be a reasonable connection to parking. So we cover our program costs, obviously, life cycle requirements, and that's both relating to facilities as well as our renewal of our equipment, which is upcoming. And then we heavily, because this is part of the mandate of our municipal park management program, we support sustainable modes of transportation. So things like EV charging, bike parking. We support the maintenance of OC Transport Park and Rides. So just a few examples there.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, certainly to follow up on what the Chair was saying, the idea that this is a tax or a tariff, I even heard the word tariff. Can you help us to understand how a user fee is not those things?
Yeah, for sure.
Chair, certainly the revenue collected as indicated, I mean, parking is considered a closed system, so any additional revenue at the end of the year gets allocated to a parking reserve fund, and those funds become available down the road. And a good example is the renewal of the equipment, so we have funds available to do that. As new facility requirements are identified, we have funds available to do that. And there's a lot of with the public realm initiatives underway in the Byward market. There is some of the allocations that are in place are to support those to ensure replacement of parking and additional parking where required.
Thank you very much for that clarity. And I'd also like to ask you to offer some comments on how the business community was consulted. I think we heard many delegations today say that they felt surprised by this, but also, you know, in your presentation and your report, you suggest that this has actually been underway since before COVID and was delayed by COVID. So I'm struggling to understand, you know, what the mechanisms were, or whether we think that we need to pass around the conversation again.
Absolutely. So Chair, while we've been undertaking this process, and that's been since late 2023, we've had 3 phases of consultation, and through those, we've tried to work carefully with Ecobia and then individual BIAs, and through the latter phases, all BIAs with paid parking, we engaged with them, and there was either an invite or a consultation session at least twice for each of those BIAs. And that includes the Byward Market District Authority. So a lot of great feedback through that process, and we certainly, I will add, we have our parking stakeholder consultation group, which I alluded to in the presentation. We had 3 sessions meeting with them through each phase of the consultation, and there are BIA representatives with that group as well.
So, what I'm picking up on, when it comes to the process and dissatisfaction with the process, is often when we go out and we consult with the public on something and we come to a different conclusion, that can feel very, dismissive of the feedback that we've received, right? And that is part of the challenge of doing, meaningful community consultations. Can you help me to understand whether in those consultations the business community did support the changes generally or no, and then we decided to use other evidence to support the decisions?
Chair, I would certainly say that there was a mix of feedback coming from the businesses when we did consult. There was a range of, in some cases, understanding of us following through on what was originally being sought, which was consistent criteria applied across the different businesses, and how the outcomes achieved that. But granted, there's absolutely concern as well expressed by those perceived impacts of what paid parking could mean in the extended hours.
Thanks for this. So, as a suburban person who used to have a social life before children and intends to have one again someday, when I move around the city, I have to say, when I make choices about where I'm going to be, certainly I have driven around Westboro looking for a parking spot. I've chosen not to go to Westboro because I know I won't find a parking spot because of the knowing that there's not going to be any turnover there. But I also don't go downtown because I can't get there without a tremendous amount of congestion. That is one of the reasons why I don't go downtown, is because I can't drive there without getting stuck in traffic. I think there's a relationship here between all of the levers of our official plan. One of them being density. Having density where your businesses are, or having local businesses pop up where density exists, is certainly a way to ensure that you always have customers. I would love to be able to do more around where I live. I don't have the great local businesses of many main streets because we don't have main street orientation in a lot of College Ward. I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, I do struggle to get around because of congestion. So I very much support the staff recommendations. I do think that they're evidence-based. We do have to create some incentives for using alternative modes of transportation. I think that the businesses that are along main streets are exceptional and unique and special. And I hope that we can create more of those main streets where I live. But as for now, I think we do need to create turnover so that I can get to where I'd like to enjoy a nice meal on my special occasions as well. And I don't currently have that opportunity given congestion throughout the city. So I want to thank staff for this. I know this is a tough one, and I appreciate the motion that shows a little more incrementalism on the changes. I think that's very healthy and responsive to community needs. And I'll look forward to supporting both the motion and the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair. I think I have more so comments than actual questions, right? Because
Or you can do both. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So the conversation about, whether it's downtown or market revitalization or just driving more people and business down there has been ongoing for a while. It's been, it's been ongoing, at least for me, since before the pandemic as well. When the joke of our sidewalks being rolled up at 5 o'clock, people going to Montreal for the weekend and things like that. So this conversation has been ongoing for a while. So I think the bigger conversation isn't really whether parking is paid, whether there's turnover. I think there are ways we can achieve better turnover without introducing new paid times. But I think the bigger picture is that there's probably, there's too thin of a resident base downtown and in the market. Like we always speak about relying on office workers. We speak about relying on people going downtown, but there are not enough people who are downtown 24/7. And a lot of the stuff needs people there 24/7 to thrive. And unfortunately, these are also the same neighborhoods where these are also the same communities, through no fault of a single person or a single entity, that have the most restrictive secondary plans. They have these heritage overlays. They tend to often be the most resistant to more density in neighborhoods that are the most appropriate for the most density. Perhaps the NCC is a problem as well. I know Councillor Tierney would love that. There are unique issues in the Byward market, like the social issues that the local council highlighted, but communities like this, like yesterday's planning meeting, for example, where we spent an hour debating 2 meters, is a perfect example of this resistance to a place, resistance to density in a place that's most appropriate for this stuff. So, I hope I hope our biggest takeaway from this conversation isn't whether or not we do more parking, more paid parking rather, or if we expand limits into the evenings and weekends and stuff. I hope our takeaway is that the revitalization for these areas, or driving more people to these businesses, rather, I should say, in a sustainable manner, relies on more people being in these communities full time, instead of relying on people going there 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, or 5 to 9, I guess mostly Thursday and Friday. But those are my comments. I had questions, but they were sort of already addressed and asked. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some comments, including some echoing my colleagues, but I have some questions first. So if one of the primary goals of the staff recommendation is clearly to encourage turnover, is it reasonable to say that if the Troster motion were to pass, that we would see ourselves losing a certain amount of potential turnover, particularly from the loss of some of the where the Troster motion seeks to pull back from your recommendation? So, by lowering the paid from 9 to 7:30, by pulling off paid parking on Sunday, would the byproduct of that be that we lose turnover on those times?
Chair, the intent of what is being recommended in terms of updating our rate setting guidelines to put these measures in place to adjust rates is to look at the busier areas at the busier times and ensure that we have an appropriate level of turnover. Scaling back the hours would just leave us in the same state that we are currently in those extended hours. So it would be after 7:30, right? Given the motion. So there would be we'd achieve part of what we're kind of aiming to get to, but we would expect to continue to see not an increase in turnover, but a continuation of the same level of turnover we're seeing right now in those busier later hours.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. Similar question with regards to another one of the stated goals of your recommendations, which is the reduction of GHG emissions. And if, as we heard from the delegate from EnviroCenter, and if Donald Shoup has made it clear that a certain amount of driving around, looking for a parking space will have an impact on GHG emissions, can I just ask, in your recommendations, knowing that reduction of GHG was a target, had you been able to quantify how much anticipated reduction in GHG could be from those recommendations if fully implemented?
Chair, there have been studies on this within the industry, and a number of them have been cited by Shoup. I mean, it's a difficult thing to quantify, to fully understand how much of that traffic. There's been some estimates, 20-30% of the vehicles circulating at any particular time are looking for a parking space. But no, short answer is no, we don't have any projections related to that.
But is it fair to say that similar to the decrease in turnover, we would see a decrease in GHG emission if we pass the Troster motion and its recommendations?
The information we have is that, yes, that is correct.
And if that is, possibly seen as a compromise, do you see benefits from the restrictions that would come from the Troster motion?
Chair, sorry, I'm not sure if I understand.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you've got these stated objectives, greater turnover and GHG emissions, and if, as you said, by passing the Troster motion, we kind of lose a bit of those goals, do you see a corollary benefit from what comes from the Troster motion? Is there a trade-off there that you'd find supportable?
Potentially, Sir Chair, it's potentially. Again, during those busier times that we're not touching, we would continue to see similar levels of a lack of available parking. So we would continue to see, higher levels of circulation at those times. So it mitigates, but I don't see necessarily a trade-off occurring.
Okay. Can you speak? So when Mr. Becta was talking about what in Montreal they have that, pay parking by app where you can re-up for a certain amount of time. It sounds like Councillor Troster said that staff is steering towards that direction. If we are developing anything in that regard, can you speak to it?
Chair, absolutely. So I can provide a quick overview of where we stand from a technology standpoint. And we do have a pay by phone service, which has been available to residents since 2012. And actually about 40% of our transactions right now are through pay by phone. So it's well established. Where we are moving next is to actually add a vendor into that space. And we'll be doing so by 2027. So there'll be multiple vendors, which will allow for some kind of competition and potentially some additional features. But we are also going to be replacing our terminals, our payment kiosks, with a upcoming procurement and moving from pay and display technology to pay by plate technology. And that we expect to see within the next year or so. So some of the discussion that occurred previously was with regards to time limits and being able to re-up. So as it stands right now in Ottawa, what's posted on the sign is the regulation, right? So if it says 2 hours, then that is the maximum amount of time that somebody can park for, and parking beyond that would be in contravention of the bylaw. So it is what was suggested is correct, that through the app, you don't have that ability to re-up while you're sitting having dinner. And that is purposeful because if we did allow that, somebody could pay, but also be susceptible to a ticket. If their car had been chalked for duration and they parked for longer than 2 hours, then even though if they pay for 4 hours, they would be at risk of a ticket, right? Because the sign says maximum limit of 2 hours. So that is the limitation in which we're working in. Without a bylaw amendment, some sort of review, that's our reality.
I only have a little bit of time left and I'll probably get back on, but just to wrap up on that issue on the pay by app, that element you speak to there, where because the stated signage says you can't go forward, and if you re-up, you may be subject to a fine. Might that restriction or that current state, might that be something that could be reviewed in the future?
As part of the traffic and parking bylaw review, that is certainly something that could be considered. That's I don't want to speak for traffic services in that sense, but certain.
And the last little question on that, because if as I understand correctly now, if you do have to switch parking spots, you have to walk, as I believe a delegate said, 300 meters, which I can understand why that would be a bit of a burden while your dinner's getting cold. Might that element of it be something that is subject to review?
Mr. Chair, I'm sure anything could be considered if the traffic and parking bylaw was to be opened up and kind of a fulsome review take place.
All right. Thank you. I'll get back on chair later on.
Councillor DeRoche.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to be supporting the amendment, and I think it eases our way to addressing some of the concerns. I'm interested in the review that would be undertaken on the effectiveness of the measures. And through that review, I'm just wondering, question to staff, are we able to get at some point who is actually the customer base now in the market, which is evolving? I agree with some of my colleagues that I think positive change in the downtown core and areas like this are going to come with greater densification of population, with shifting some of the federal buildings, hopefully in a timely fashion, to residential. That's not something this council has invented in this term of council. I think it's something we've been saying for many, many years. I know the BIAs were here today, and they are working extremely hard to shop local and to stay in their community, whether it be Barrhaven or different parts of the city. We've been encouraging strong buy local campaigns. And I think over the years, the market has suffered, if you will, or changed as a result of that. Thankfully, we still have a very strong and thriving tourism economy, which tends to be focused in the downtown. So I'm just curious, when we get this report back in terms of effectiveness, do you think we'd get some idea in terms of, is this tourism related parking? Is it the employee related parking that's getting a lot of focus today? Is it Quebec parking? What can we get in terms of feedback, in terms of not only how it's working, but how is really the market changing as a result of the tremendous growth we've seen throughout the city?
Chair, certainly that piece is something that can be scoped in as part of the work that we'll do. It's when we venture out and do our local area parking studies, we try to catch as much information related to that as possible. Some of it's easier to capture than others. But certainly we would endeavor to kind of capture as big a picture as possible, and that can be something, whether it be through surveys or detailed parking duration inventories. We would seek to grab.
Okay, that's all for me, Chair. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Troster, Vice Chair Troster, sorry.
Thank you so much. And actually, my question is similar to Councillor DeRush, but I'm just, so we're saying, okay, so if we go halfway with this compromise motion, we're going to look at the data, and then there'll be a recommendation for 2027. So what metrics are we using? So you said surveys. How do we tell if this is having the desired impact of moving, increasing the ability of finding parking? I assume we get the data right off the meters. Like, if you could give me like a granular sense of like what we'll have in front of us to make a new decision or a revised decision in 2027.
Sure, absolutely. So we lean heavily on two metrics, not exclusively, but we do lean heavily on occupancy and parking duration, right, which is a function of turnover. So that is something that obviously capturing. We have an extensive amount of data, to this point, and we'll continue to collect that to kind of set that baseline, moving towards the implementation of these changes that are, part of this report and clarified as part of the motion. So, but obviously it's more than that. And I touched on it with my previous answers, that there's a deeper dive that can occur to kind of more fully understand the general patterns that are at play in terms of the where those parkers are coming from and what their purpose in the area is. So we'll lean heavily on the data that that kind of forms the core of what we do, but obviously expand out as required.
Okay, and I understand. I'm hearing fear from some restaurant owners that this could be a disincentive, and so I know they'll be looking at their own bottom line during that period of time. Is there a way to capture that data too? Although I will also say correlation is not causation. That's the tricky part, because there's a lot of other things going on, other reasons. Food is very expensive. People are dining out less, but I'm just wondering, how can we reflect their perspective so we can have kind of a bit of a before and after?
Yeah. Certainly, Chair. I will say that we actually have a very detailed monitoring plan developed for the implementation of paid parking in Kitchissippi. And I can see some, and now we've consulted with the BIAs on the development of that, and I can see us leveraging that, because it does move beyond those kind of core pieces of data and then looks at the bigger picture. So I can see us using that, to support this process as well.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I guess the only thing I'll say is I think it's incumbent on us as decision makers to make data-informed decisions. There are a lot of concerns here, and I think the compromise motion that I'm putting forward, acknowledges that and gives us a little bit more time to sort of test this shift in real time. I actually think we're going to be fine. I don't think this will have a huge impact on business, but if I'm wrong, we have another chance to look at this in 2027. But I also trust data, not just from big cities, not just from the New York cities and the Montreals and the Torontos, but from like pretty much every jurisdiction that has studied this, that the high cost of, ooh,
Somebody's parking is fine.
yeah, seriously. I'll just finish there. Thanks.
Great. And we'll continue. There will be a broadcast if there's anything to take place, and we'll keep you informed. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks, Chair. Look, we've heard a lot of great arguments today, and I'll just build a little bit on what we heard from Councillor Lowe. You know, as we consider the expansion of paid parking in Ottawa, we need to recognize that it's not just a question about meters and machines. It's a reflection of how we've designed our city and how we want it to grow. And for too long, we've relied on a model where the vitality of our downtown depends on people driving in from the suburbs every day, grabbing lunch, running errands, or filling up office towers. But that model is really starting to show its cracks, especially after COVID. More and more suburban residents would rather live, work, and shop in their own communities. And who can blame us? This is just another ghost of amalgamation. It's a legacy decision that continues to haunt us, the legacy of a decision that continues to haunt us. A city that was stitched together without a clear path for how different communities would grow, connect, and support each other. And today we're still grappling with those consequences. It's a downtown that's built to rely on the suburbs, and suburbs built without the jobs.
Councillor Luloff, greatest apologies. They have great sound systems here that are very loud. So maybe we'll take a 5-minute recess, and we'll adjourn at 11:50, depending if these bells are shut off, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure, Chair. No problem.
I want to hear what you have to say. You have some valuable points here. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
Adjourn for 5 minutes.
Yeah, you got it.
Councillor Luloff, I want to hear what you were saying. The dinging was so loud. Do you mind restarting again if that's okay? And we're still waiting for the announcement. I don't know what's going on there, but they'll either say run or stay. So I guess we're staying for now. So Councillor Luloff?
Is everything okay there, Chair?
We're quite fine. Please go.
Okay, good. Okay. As we consider the expansion of paid parking here in Ottawa, we need to recognize that this isn't just a question of meters and machines, that it's a reflection of how we've designed our city and how we want to grow. And for too long, we've relied on a model where the vitality of our downtown depends on people driving in from the suburbs every day, grabbing lunch, running errands, or filling up office towers. But that model is starting to show its cracks, especially after COVID. More and more suburban residents would rather live, work, and shop in their own communities. We've heard that today, and who can blame us? This is yet another ghost of amalgamation, a legacy of a decision that continues to haunt us as a city that was stitched together without a clear plan for how different communities would grow, connect, and support each other. And today, we're still grappling with the consequences. We have a downtown that's built to rely on the suburbs, and suburbs built without the jobs and services that people need. And we're growing out here in the suburbs. Councillor Kitts will tell you that. We're maturing, and with that growth comes the responsibility to support local jobs and services closer to where people live. If we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions like we've heard today and build a more sustainable city, we need to stop asking people to commute across town for things they should be able to access nearby. And at the same time, if we want a vibrant downtown, we need to stop treating it like a place people only go during business hours. We need more housing in the core. We need more people living near the restaurants, shops, and services that we're trying to sustain. Because when people live nearby, they don't need to drive there and they don't need to pay for parking. They don't have to worry about parking at all because they can walk. The irony of expanding paid parking is this. The goal isn't to penalize people who come downtown. It's to reflect a future where we're less dependent on vehicles in the first place. A future where downtown businesses are supported by neighbors and not just commuters from the suburbs. A future where our neighborhoods, whether suburban or central, are self-sustaining, vibrant, and resilient. So yes, let's have a conversation about parking, but we also need to have a greater conversation about how we're using land downtown, housing, and equity. So let's stop asking suburban residents to carry the burden of keeping the core afloat. Let's build a city where everyone, no matter where they live, can access what they need close to home. This is far more about parking. It's about our priorities as a city and as a council and the kind of city that we want to become. So I think what I want to say at the end here is that this report reflects what we're trying to move toward. And I appreciate the compromise motion, all the work that the chair has done in the background here. Let's move forward and build a better city where we can stay and work and live and play in the neighborhoods that we're in now. Thanks.
Wow, I'm glad you reread that. Thank you very much, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Devine again.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting me back on. Just one more, I believe just one more question and then some comments. So during the delegations, we heard, tons of people are arguing about their concerns, both for customers and then for employees. And not that the city owes, it's not the city's responsibility to provide, discounted parking for employees. That's not what we're mandated to do. But when we have concentrated areas like the Byward Market, I can see the impact of that. So can I just ask, when staff is coming back and reporting, would that be a separate element for you? If staff were to go away and to investigate what options there could be with, let's say, putting off a certain amount of parking spaces in a municipal parking lot so that employees could, park over there while customers park here so we have that turnover, would that kind of investigation be separate from the reporting that you're doing right now?
Chair, I certainly see that as being something that would be rolled into that study if we were directed to report back in 2027. I think there's an opportunity, and certainly, the concerns that have been expressed around employee parking and trying to find solutions around that, although our focus is on more the short-term parking, but seeing what we can do across the board is something we'd be looking to roll up into that report back.
Thank you, because I appreciate that you're going to be reporting back on this in the first place. And I'm not looking to overload you with other work, but I think there's an interesting thing there to be considered. I want to thank staff for their work on this. I remember having a conversation with you, Scott, well over a year ago, where I was looking forward to all of the important changes you're bringing to parking for the city, and I was looking forward to this one. And I absolutely applaud and support the staff recommendations. I'd like to even say that they're innovative, but even as you presented in your slide deck, we're really just catching up to some other cities. And I would love us to catch up to other cities. And when I was speaking to a delegate trying to compare, whether it's other cities in Ottawa, and they say that, well, I hear this all the time, it drives me batty. Well, Ottawa is not like those other cities. And the thing that I get frequently frustrated by is that staff brings, bold change to the city. You offer us the chance to head off in a bold direction, even just to catch up to other cities. And what do? We pour water onto it. And it comes back being something diluted from the ideal that you're trying to strive for. So I certainly appreciate the effort. And I'm very glad that we got to hear Councillor Luloff get back on the mic there, because I fundamentally agree that what we have here is, a lack of cohesion in the city. And I'm glad that my colleague, Councillor Johnson, spoke about congestion of getting into city, and Councillor Lowe spoke about the density of. I've been listening to, when I'm hearing people on, let's say, CFRA talk daily about, they work in the market. And when they talk about the problem of getting to the market or getting to work there, they're not talking so much about the parking issue as much as the journey getting in there, the congestion journey getting in there. And if we listen to what Councillor Luloff is advocating for, if we build these areas not to attract people from far off, but to service the people that live in those areas, we can be alleviating those. Same thing with Councillor Lowe's impressive comments on advocating for better density within those areas. So I will be supporting the staff recommendations. I think those are the direction we should be going. I don't see the corollary benefits of the compromises in the Troxter motion. I will not be supporting that. I'd like us to move in the direction that the city to its core knows it should be moving towards. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. And seeing no other questions, I have a couple just to follow up. During this whole process, Scott, you've done a tremendous job. You're doing exactly what council directed. Council is the ultimate authority, but we are no experts. Let's make that very clear. So we depend on you guys, and you've done a thorough effort. When I asked you how many times you've met or consulted or discussed with people, it works out to approximately 30 times with, I think it's about 6 different groups, including the Byward Market District Authority, Ecobia. It would be about 30 times that there has been consultations. At any point, especially the most final cuts of it, did anyone come out and firmly say no? And on top of that, I think we've discovered, why are they not telling their own businesses? This is the challenge I'm having with this, because it's when it gets to this level where we've done so much work as a city, you've done exactly what we've asked you to do. Obviously, you can't comment why these groups are not telling their businesses about this, but you've done your due diligence to make sure those organizations are fully aware, and no one has firmly come out and said no, formed a position.
Chair, certainly, and I'll repeat how I qualified it earlier, is that we certainly received a mix of feedback, and from at a number of points, there certainly was concern expressed, right? Over those perceived impacts about, specifically the Paid Parking Act serving as a deterrent, right? From that angle rather than the turnover side. So we did receive that, I'd say, concern on different occasions, but an outright no, I don't believe that was ever.
You're being kind, and that's fine, and you do you, and we'll do our political side, but that's what it is. I implore all our businesses to speak to their organizations and say, why, when you find out an inkling of this, you're not telling us this or communicating with us? I think that would go a long way, because we've gone so far down the road to work on this. This hasn't been done in a vacuum. It's been happening for years. That being said, that's a political thing. That's something that we're going to ensure that we force that discussion to take place in the future. Is there any other context you wish to add, Scott? I want you to understand all of council supports the work you do. You're one of the hardest working ones that educates every single one of us. We all are in the bubble. We know exactly what you're doing here, and it's at council's direction. It's to make business better. Is that not correct? This is not a revenue generator in any way for the city of Ottawa. So did you want to add context to that?
Chair, that's certainly correct. I mean, the reality is it does generate revenue, but that's the purpose and our underlying mandate is about the provision of service. And that service is defined by the mandate of the municipal park management strategy. And one of those core objectives is ensuring available short-term parking. So that is the primary driver here.
Right. Oh, and just to clarify, sorry, the revenue under the Municipal Act, if people don't understand, the Municipal Act is guided by the province. We're not making it up. They say it has to go into a bucket that we can't access for anything in the city except for parking related items. And you explained that before, correct?
Correct. Right.
Okay,
So
good.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Nope. That's good. I appreciate the opportunity, but
It's good clarity because I think people think we're using this as a cash grab, and it is not the case. So at this point, I think I'll just add some additional commentary very quickly. I consider myself a professional cat herder. I have no problem taking bullets on this, getting out there and speaking publicly about these issues. But at the same time, it's a two-way street. We need our businesses to engage their organizations. I think that's really critical. And that's what we're witnessing here is it's the 11th hour. And suddenly they're going, hey, why is this happening? If I owned a business, I'd stay on top of it pretty firmly. So I'm kind of failing to understand how we've got to this point, but with working with Councillor Troster specifically and Councillor Plant to her credit, I think we found something that I'm hoping we'll have enough votes here today. I think it could be a little tighter, but that will allow us to get us to the next gate, which would be before council. I know all the businesses that were here today were saying, well, start charging people on Sundays and just give us back the 5:30. I think the compromise to 7:30 is good. I think if we start looking at the Sundays between now and council, I'd want to consult the church communities, the brunch communities, all those people, and the employees that have to pay for the parking on those Sundays. We don't pay for parking. That's not our job for employees. But certainly that's what we've heard today. A lot of this discussions are around employee parking. That being said, there was a lot of great comments by Councillor Devine as well about looking at opportunities in the future, along with the 2-hour current window for parking with our new sets of meters coming in. There could be more opportunity in the future. But at least it's good to move in this direction, see what happens, and reevaluate and continue to work with our business community. So on that, I'm going to ask for the amending motion, Vice Chair Troster's motion. I'll call for a recorded vote. Marcia?
Councillor Luloff,
Yes.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor Gower, Councillor Johnson,
Yes.
Councillor Devine,
No.
Councillor Bradley,
Yes.
Councillor Troster,
Yes.
Councillor DeRoche,
Wait.
Councillor Lowe,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kitts, and Chair Tierney.
Yes.
8 yeas, 1 nay.
Great, thank you. And on is the actual item, the staff report that you've done terrific work on, is that carried as amended?
As amended.
And at this point, I'm going to give my seat to Vice Chair Troster. So forgive the name unless you want to change it on here. We're moving on to the next item onto the agenda. And just before Vice Chair takes the chair, forgive me, the clerk always corrects me. There was an IPD 7.1 Planning Development Services Department report using delegated authority, plan right-of-way heritage, urban design, and building code services. Did anyone want that added to the agenda, or is that carried? Carried? Okay, great. Thank you for keeping me in line. Okay, It's up to you, Vice Chair Troster. Have fun. No, President.
Okay.
I get to take your chair.
It's warm. Thank you so much, everybody. So now we are moving on to a motion by Councillor Tierney on Bank Street Active Transportation and Transit Priority Feasibility Study. Do we need to read the motion in? Chair Tierney? Do you need to read your motion in? It was previously given, so.
Yeah.
Okay. It's well understood. Okay. We do have a technical amendment. If they could bring that up on the screen, I can read that. Or Councillor Tierney can, because he's Chair Tierney, because he's vice chair right now. Do you want to read?
I'll go right ahead there. Thank you. Whereas it's covering the report that was item circulated to members of council without planning and development and building code services comment, therefore be it resolved that the report be amended to include the following. Planning and Development Building Services Department. As part of the current scope of the Bank Street Active Transportation and Transit Priority Feasibility Story impacts the adjacent community are being considered in the evaluation of options. This motion be approved. Staff will explain the scope and consult the assignments to undertake more detailed analysis of the community impacts and potential mitigation measures. This will work and can be undertaken within the department's existing budgetary authority and not expected to impact the overall project schedule, which is targeted for completion this fall. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I understand we have a few delegations. The first one we have on deck is Marko Milijusevic. Is he online? Okay, Marko, you have your 5 minutes. Welcome. Okay, we're just promoting you. Okay, we're going to message him. I see Derek Simpson is in the room. So Derek, do you mind coming up first? Thank you so much. From the Centertown Community Association, the chair of the Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, my name is Derek Simpson. I'm the board chair and the transportation chair at the Centertown Community Association. So the Bank Street Transit Study had its first public consultation in June 2024. Almost a year later, we've barely...
Hello, testing. Can you guys hear me okay? Or...
Do we want to go to Marko? All right.
Great. Marko, Derek's going to go first just because we had some trouble getting you online, and then you can go second. Okay, go ahead.
Almost a year later, we've barely heard anything more on it. I don't believe this motion will not impact the schedule. I believe it will lead to further delays, and we can't afford to delay bus lanes any longer with the motion. Bus lanes on Bank Street would cost little money, would increase transit revenues, and would reduce traffic. Here are some numbers that prove we don't need to delay bus lanes on Bank even more. Number one, the Centertown Community Association's Transportation Committee voted bus lanes on Bank Street as our #1 priority for 2025. 100,000. That's the combined weekly ridership for the 6 and 7, Bank Street's main bus routes. Bank Street is by far the busiest bus corridor in the city. 120 million. That's OC Transpo's budget hole at the start of the 2025 budget. We need to increase revenues. We need money. This is where money comes from. 20%. That's the number of people, according to a City of Ottawa survey, that drive to destinations on Bank Street. 87% of respondents said they would walk 5 minutes or more to reach a destination on Bank Street. Now for some parking stats. 1,000. That's the number of parking spots at Lansdowne. 143. That's the number of street parking spots on Bank in the study area. 7% is the percentage of parking in the study area that is street parking on Bank. There's a lot of additional parking in the area. Just earlier today, we heard from Todd Brown, involved in a group of 28 restaurants who cited Toronto and Montreal's great public transit as a reason for those cities' restaurants' success. I'll provide one final example to show how much the community cares about this issue. A community group I'm involved with decided to purchase ads at the Mayfair Theatre to support bus lanes. It was out of our price range, but we saw it as a good opportunity to support a local business. We reached out to the community and raised enough money in less than 2 hours. People really care about this issue. Next Thursday, May 29th, we're taking over the sign out in front of the Mayfair with a special message promoting bus lanes on Bank Street. To conclude, bus lanes would be good for our finances and ridership. They have support from the community, and they would not take any significant parking away from the area. Any and every issue will have some opposition. It doesn't mean we should increase red tape and bureaucracy to slow down community-supported solutions. I encourage you to vote against this motion and to speed up the implementation of faster buses and less traffic on Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Are there any questions? Thank you so much for being here. Okay, Marco, you're up next.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay? Sweet. Sorry about the technical issues earlier. Yeah, my name is Marco. I'm a board member of Strong Towns Ottawa, and I've been following this study with the group ever since it was made public over a year ago. While I can understand where the motion comes from, especially residents who might be concerned about extra traffic in their streets, I will say it strikes me as odd to continue adding requirements for more studying to a study that is already extremely behind schedule. For reference, the study is originally supposed to have its second public consultation about 5 months ago. That's been delayed over and over again. At a certain point, we have to stop studying things and actually just do them. We're never going to have every single variable perfectly mapped before making a decision. And from all the examples and data that we currently have from our own city and elsewhere around the world, there's no reason to assume that there's going to be some huge issues that come from improving transit along Bank Street. Even if there were, those are things that can be solved afterwards with fairly easy changes to local roads to prevent cut-through traffic, or even implementing paid parking to cut down on cruising in the area. As we heard earlier in the parking delegations, the city staff even acknowledge that adding paid parking cuts down on cruising and people driving around neighborhoods. So if that's a concern, it's something we can look into. We currently know that this section of Bank Street is one of the most delayed sections in the whole city for buses, and we know that this section of Bank Street is one that carries the most riders in our whole transit system with lines 6 and 7. So I don't think we should be delaying this even further. We cannot keep delaying the improvement of a vital transit corridor, especially when the city is constantly worrying about ridership numbers and doesn't have the money to make larger investments. This is the perfect time to make small and meaningful changes as soon as possible to help reinstill confidence in our transit system. We also can't afford to keep wasting money on more and more studies as a city. At a certain point, you just have to go and do it. Earlier today, during the discussion about parking rates, multiple business owners talked about other cities that have better public transit and how it makes their business districts a success. So listen to your own business owners. They seem to understand that it makes what it takes to make a business thrive, and that's better public transit. Regarding petitions, our group has been speaking to local businesses, transit riders, people shopping along Bank, and more. And we've heard tons of overall support from every one of these groups. Every single time we've had discussions with people about 24/7 bus lanes, they are almost unanimously in support. We've had over 200 people sign our petition in support of the 24/7 bus lanes on Bank, and we get more coming in every day. The city's conducted a survey asking responders what they would like to see done in the area. We ended up requesting the full data set and analyzed it in our own time. The data is fairly unanimous. Out of almost 3,000 responses, over 87% of people said they'd walk at least 5 minutes after parking to reach their destination. 67.7% said they'd walk at least 10 minutes. And the clear first place choice of options was bus lanes, which was selected as the first option out of 6 by a whopping 34% of people, or close to 1,000 responses as their first option. Almost every single demographic of responses, from people who get to Bank by bus, by car, walking, had bus lanes in their top 3 choices, even people who drive there. 78% of responses, or a whopping 4 out of 5 people, chose a preferred option that wasn't parking or driving lanes for cars. That means about 2,200 people said that they wanted bus lanes, bike lanes, wider sidewalks, or more trees instead of parking. Are we going to deny these 2,200 people what they want because a couple of locals are worried about something that may or may not even happen? The nice thing about swapping to something like parking over to bus lanes is that it's very easy to undo if something does not work out well. But the longer we delay this, the worse the situation gets with our transit, and the more it will cost the city to do, which is something we can't afford to do given our current financial situation. More studying just means more and more costs added onto something that should be a relatively simple and inexpensive change and can be reversed very easily. If we want to be prudent with the taxpayers' money, we need to cut down on this extra bureaucracy, not add more and more of it. We know the positives that come with improving transit. Please don't delay this even more. We should not let a loud minority of people stand in the way of very necessary progress that should be happening as soon as possible and is supported by the majority of people. I would urge you to amend this motion so that it seeks to instead study the effects after implementing the bus lanes instead of beforehand, and see what outcomes there are and what can be done to mitigate any issues after the changes have gone through. We will never be able to fully predict how people react to changes, so trying to study things until the end of the time to figure out what's going to be perfect is just implausible. Constantly putting off any sort of progress is just not the way to make our city a better place for us all. Thank you. And that was all for me.
Thank you, Marco. And just stay on the line because we have a question from Councillor. No, we don't. Oh, for staff. Okay, we'll go to staff after. But actually, Marco, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And it would be a similar question for Derek. I guess I'll just gently push back on that because, you know, my family and I, when we cycle, we tend to avoid Bank Street and use those side streets. So if there's a potential, you know, if the priority, for example, is given to buses on Bank Street and people are asking to cycle on side streets, and there is a potential need for mitigation mitigation measures because it could make it less safe to cycle on those side streets if more cars choose to use them. Don't you see the utility in taking a look at how we can mitigate that?
I absolutely completely get, as someone who also cycles pretty much every time I go down to Lansdowne, I completely understand it. And I would also be worried. One thing I would say is O'Connor has bike lanes and hopefully can be improved so that they're actually fully separated ones, not just kind of paint on the line or paint on the ground. So I think absolutely there's improvements that could be made there. And as a cyclist, you know, I'm always trying to think about what could be made safer. I would say though that like Bank Street having bus lanes would improve the actual cycling on Bank Street itself for someone cycling there, because you're not worried about getting doored from parked cars. You're not worried about having to weave in and out of traffic. You could use the bus lanes themselves, as I do often on Rideau Street that has bus lanes too. So I would say like that's part of what I was saying is it's hard to fully map out exactly what is going to happen after we make changes. And so that's why I would urge to make the changes and study it very closely afterwards and see how things actually shake out, right? And so instead of delaying it further for something that, again, is easily undone, I would say, you know, from most evidence that we have, getting better transit in the area is going to improve things. You know, then afterwards we can look at what needs to be changed and made better.
Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, what I've learned in my time on council from our transportation staff is how transportation really is a system, and sometimes there's unintended consequences that can make one street safer and make another street less safe. So I personally don't see the harm in taking a look at potential mitigation in advance, so people have the whole picture when we have a final proposal. But I do appreciate your perspective, and I will be asking questions to staff about how much this could possibly delay things. So thank you for being here.
Yep, thank you as well. Appreciate it.
Next up, we have AJ Ramachandran.
Hello. So Bank Street has the most ridership of any transit corridor in our city. The 6 and 7 combined to serve 22,000 daily riders in September 2024. And at the same time, we have a severe bus shortage due to an aging bus fleet. And this causes us to have to cancel many trips throughout the city due to buses not being available. According to data published by OC Transpo at the last Transit Commission, the average number of buses available for service is 521, but they need 540 buses for scheduled service. This is a shortage of 19 buses just on an average day without any issues. We need to use our buses as efficiently as possible to be able to make the most of our limited bus fleet. The way to do that is to have bus lanes that make buses actually complete their trip faster, which allows them to move on and complete other trips that are otherwise going to have a canceled bus. This motion will delay a vital study that's intended to improve the reliability, speed, and experience for 22,000 daily riders, as well as thousands of others who will not have their buses canceled anymore due to reliability issues. We need Bank Street bus lanes now, and to do that, we have to get the study over the finish line as fast as possible. We can't keep delaying this. This study has been going on for years at this point. We need to get this study finished. So I encourage you to vote against this motion.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, but I see a colleague of mine scribbling down some questions for staff that we'll certainly ask. Thanks so much. Last person on the list, we have Hattie Y. I'm sorry, I don't have a last name for you. Are you here? Okay, we're just trying to promote you.
Hello. 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 Can you hear me?
Hi, Hattie. Yep, you've got 5 minutes.
All right. Thank you for letting me delegate. My name is Hattie.
I'm sorry, we're not hearing you. Okay, we'll give him another minute to try and reconnect. Hi, how do you see you on the screen now? You have 5 minutes. You just need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I got disconnected for some reason. All right. Thank you for allowing me to delegate. My name is Patty. I would have to agree with most of the points stated. Bank Street is possibly the busiest street in the city and serves the most amount of transit riders anywhere else in the network without even a source of transit.
I'm so sorry, Hadi. If you don't mind forwarding your comments in writing, I think that will probably be best because we're having trouble keeping you on the line. There seem to be some tech issues on your side, but thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay, I see Councillor Devine has a question.
It's Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. So the kind of work that the motion is asking that staff do, i.e. to just, to take a look at what might be the corollary impacts of the feasibility study on the neighboring area, is that kind of work that you'd already be doing in the feasibility study that is already being planned?
Through the chair. So at a high level, yes, we'd be looking at community impacts. This motion would let us go a little bit more into the details in terms of the volumes of traffic that might be seen on those side streets and if there's any potential mitigation measures that would be proposed. But at a high level, when we're looking at evaluation of options, yes, impacts to the community would be part of the analysis.
Right, because I'm fundamentally trying to just get a sense of the rationale or necessity for a broadening of the scope. I don't imagine that when we're doing, if there was going to be like a new road widening project in my ward and there's going to be a feasibility study for it, I don't think necessarily we'd broaden the scope of the feasibility study just to consider the impact that that might have on an active transportation. I think it's also fair to say that in the current state of Bank Street, with, as was said, one of our biggest transit corridors along with vehicle traffic, there likely is just as much cut through traffic or corollary impact in the surrounding areas already, perhaps even more so than what might happen by improving the speed of the corridor. I guess, so my next question is, it says here that this work can be undertaken within the department's existing budget authority and is not expected to impact the overall project schedule, which is targeted for completion in the fall. But simply by broadening the scope of the study you're going to be doing here, it would, can I assume that it would at least delay the delivery of the feasibility study?
Again, through the chair. So the expectation is that this analysis could be done in parallel with some of the other work that's being done on the project so that it wouldn't impact sort of the overall study timelines. It could delay potentially the start of the consultation period, but there's a lot of technical analysis that's also happening on this project. And so the work could be done in parallel.
Do we do this kind of broadened study on any, are there any other parallel projects, any other active transportation and transit priority feasibility studies that we're doing elsewhere in the city where we're doing this kind of broadening of scope?
Again, through the chair. So it's quite common on transportation projects that the scope of a project be amended as the project is proceeding to account from the feedback that we're hearing from the community, the results of the technical analysis. And so it might be different things that are looked at as part of those scope changes, but it's certainly a fairly standard occurrence on major transportation projects, particularly ones where there are very significant impacts, which is the case in this very constrained corridor.
If the study results in, it says here, to identify potential mitigation measures, I'm not sure if it would be recommending mitigation measures, but whether it identifies or recommends, is it possible that those mitigation measures that are identified could be added to the budget of the overall project as a whole and therefore, putting the overall project at risk?
So at this point, there is no funding source identified for the project. I think if there were mitigation measures that were identified through this process, it would be staff's recommendation to include those mitigations as part of the project budget. And when a funding source was looked at for the project as a whole, that would be part of that.
All right, thank you. I guess I'm just generally. Yeah, because my next question is I suppose to the mover, like, not that I'm an expert on this project, but this is a ward specific project, a councillor driven project. And I'm not, typically familiar with, this kind of.
Did you want me to explain it?
Outside, the rationale or.
Yep, perfect. So in a nutshell, obviously with a project this big and we don't have at this point, there is no recommendation. Working with staff, obviously this can be done in conjunction. Obviously the working with the ward councillor as well. There are always concerns about impacts on the local streets in the community. We heard that as PWIC chair. Obviously we want to ensure that the local neighborhood is also included at looking at where's the traffic going to go within the neighborhoods. If you start closing certain segments down, impacts on business. This is just an extra level to make sure it's on the record to be able to be part of that study. It has no impact on timelines. It has no impact on cost, but it's certainly, I think the community wants to hear about.
And do we anticipate that this is the model going forward for any councillor-led project or?
Well, actually, I think this is a pretty standard process to look at the affected communities. I don't think this is anything new.
Okay, all right. Thank you, chairs. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you so much. Councillor Johnson, you had your hand up before, or?
Yeah, no, I'm okay. I think that Councillor Devine covered off most all of the questions. I think I just wanted to have it confirmed that regardless of changes in scope at this stage, staff is confident that they can still recommend the feasibility of these transit lanes independently, like that question of whether they're feasible or not is still has its own integrity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tierney, I see Councillor Menard is on the call. Did you want to wrap or did you want to speak next?
Oh, I was hoping that actually staff could answer that question. Sorry, Chair. Like, I just want to understand if the integrity of the feasibility as a question remains, regardless of whether or not local communities are uncomfortable. Because certainly, again, speaking as a suburban councillor, if I want to go to Lansdowne, I would really like to go on the bus. Like, I do not like driving down there. I do not go down there because of the congestion. I would like some other alternatives. And so I just want to make sure that in terms of its transportation planning integrity remains, regardless of what the traffic services implications might be. Like, we just need to have that as a separate conversation.
Okay, is there anyone from staff who wants to address that?
Yes, again, through the chair, the evaluation of alternatives is progressing. I mean, it considers the impacts to communities as part of that evaluation. So it's already being part of the review of the different options, along with all of the other impacts that we would look at when we evaluate options. So that is separate, that's continuing. And this is just an added layer of looking at what sort of mitigations could be required within the community should there be negative impacts identified through the analysis.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. Councillor Menard?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Chair. Obviously, this is my ward, so figure I should chime in on this a little bit. I think some context is missing today, and I'll just fill folks in on how this came to be. We had a heightened character study in this area this last term of council, and as part of that heightened character study, there was a decision made to look at the transportation in this area. It's not solely on transit. It's supposed to look at cycling, transit, pedestrians, personal motor vehicles. All of that is being considered right now. Staff have done consultation on this. My office has done consultation on this, certainly. I don't think what Councillor Tierney is proposing is a big deal. I think staff are doing some of this in any event, but also just we're not hearing a big outcry or anything around the side streets. But what I think what Councillor Tierney has put forward here is just something that as a matter of course is probably fine. So I don't see a big issue with it. The bigger piece here is, this is supposed to be a potential pilot project in the future. It's looking at different options here. It's a tough corridor where you have to cater to multiple forms of transportation, not just transit, not just cars, not just people walking, and not just people biking. I do all of those on this street, and there needs to be a real kind of section by section approach here. And I've communicated that to staff. I've had a good meeting with Councillor Kitts, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Troster on this. The Bank Street Bridge is different than in front of Lansdowne, which is different north of Homewood, which is different north of Glebe Avenue, which is different closer to the 417, closer to Councillor Troster's ward. So there'll be different impacts on those types of blocks depending on what we change. I think it's important here. We have to consider all modes of transportation, having some discussion about other impacts outside of this. I don't think is a big concern. It's more so what ends up getting recommended here and how we go about implementing those things on a different basis per basically block or section. So just to chime in to say this has been ongoing for us. We chat with folks every day about this, and we're going to keep doing that in the meantime to make sure we get to a good result here that's going to improve it. And sometimes that means transformational change, and sometimes that means modest changes that can improve this for a lot of different users. So I'm hopeful we'll get there. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Sure, Chair. If I'm reading this motion correctly, I have I don't know if the mover or maybe staff can help clarify my understanding a little bit. If I'm reading this motion correctly or not, is that normally when we do these studies and look at these streets, we sort of silo our view onto the street itself and maybe like the first few meters of all the adjoining streets. Would I be correct in assuming that this motion was necessary because we want to take a more high level look at Bank, at O'Connor, whatever the next north-south street is, and all the east-west streets as well, plus the Parkway and all, like take a more wholesome look at the community instead of just siloing our view to Bank Street?
Thank you. As a mover, if it's okay, Chair. Yeah, certainly that's exactly what this is about. And, we've watched over time as well. The NCC keeps changing their ideas of things too, which affects local traffic patterns. I'm very happy to see that they're listening to the public now on a lot of things. I think that's important, but we do have to plan ahead about all those additional routes and how they all feed in. So yes, that's quite correct. That's why this is in front of us today.
Okay, I know I'm grateful that we had this conversation because I was sort of semi-apprehensive to the motion initially, but now that it's been clarified, I'm more willing to support it. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Councillor Lowe. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Is the amendment motion carried? Carried. Great. And is this item carried as amended? Carried. Excellent. I will turn the chair back to the chair.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Vice Chair. So we'll move along to the next item, which is, yes, we do have notices of motion. So I'll get to Councillor Dudas. Councillor Dudas, are you online?
I am. Okay, thank you, Chair. Whereas Innes Road is classified as an arterial road and runs east-west through the entirety of Blackburn Hamlet. Whereas Innes Road is the primary transportation corridor through the hamlet, regardless of method of transportation. Whereas the vast majority of the roadway prohibits parking on both sides, save for a small section on the north side at the east end. Whereas the north side of the section of Innes Road only has a mixed gravel asphalt shoulder for dropping off into a ditch. And whereas the section of roadway includes multiple bus stops and is commonly used by both pedestrians and cyclists. Whereas when vehicles are parked along this section, it forces all vulnerable users either into the ditch or into an active vehicular traffic lanes in order to pass the parked cars. Whereas the conditions under which staff have delegated authority to implement a change to the curbside regulations along the stretch of Innis Road are not met, based on the on-street parking regulation change policy as approved by Council in April 2017. Therefore, it be resolved, the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee recommend that Council approve changing existing curbside regulations along the north side of Innis Road between the Blackburn Hamlet bypass and the Western Clairou Crescent intersection to prohibit parking, and be it further resolved that corresponding no parking signage be installed as soon as practical in 2025.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. The next one is Councillor Johnson on behalf of Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas the Carlington neighborhood of River Ward has a default speed limit of 40 an hour on residential streets as part of the Entry Gateway Speed Limit Traffic Calming Initiative. Whereas the Carlington Community Association Transportation Committee has worked closely with the local councillor in recent years, identifying several traffic calming initiatives to pursue and implement within the neighborhood. Whereas there is a local desire to amend the speed limit on local residential streets from 40 to 30 an hour and would be tested in approximately half the neighborhood first as part of a phased-in approach. Whereas the area referenced in the motion includes Turnbull School, W.E. Gowling Public School, the Adult High School, the Alexander Community Center, Harold Place Park, Alexander Park, and Meadowvale Park. Therefore, be it resolved that the entry gateway speed limit for Carlington East, Carling to the north, Fisher to the east, Kingston to the south, and Maryvale to the west be amended from 40 to 30 an hour on all residential streets, excluding arterial and collector streets. And be it further resolved that the costs associated with the implementation be covered by the River Ward Ward 16 traffic calming budget. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that. So we do have a couple of inquiries. Councillor Kitts isn't here, but Councillor DeRoche has offered to read them in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Doing this on behalf of Councillor Kitts. Happily, some communities, including Ward 19, have experienced road infrastructure degradation in certain instances due to significant fill hauling operations linked to the development and construction activity. These heavy trucking operations impact the condition of the roadway pavement, paved and gravel surfaces, and safety of the road users. These activities can also strain city maintenance resources and place the burden on taxpayers to fund road upkeep following damage by hauling operations. Could staff please identify what regulatory tools currently exist surrounding heavy vehicles and their impact on municipal road infrastructure, particularly outside of the seasonal load restriction period? Specifically, one, what legislative or regulatory tools are currently available to manage or mitigate the impacts of heavy vehicles on public roads? Two, how are these tools enforced? Three, are there any opportunities within development approvals, permitting, or bylaw process to require securities, cost sharing, or road maintenance agreements where heavy vehicles are used over public roads? Four, do staff have it on their work plan to review other options to address this issue? If so, what is the context of these reviews and what city departments will be involved? Second inquiry, Mr. Chair, is the following. As part of my ongoing interest in improving the quality and longevity of our infrastructure and road rehabilitation program, I, Councillor Kitts, would like to inquire whether staff have explored the use of recycled plastic materials in asphalt paving. I understand that this practice has been adopted in various municipalities globally with some reported net benefits. I would appreciate your insight on the following specific questions. One, what data or feedback is available on the use of recycled materials, mainly plastics and asphalt? Two, have the environmental benefits been considered? Three, how cost effective would it be and would there be any economic potential? Four, are there any disadvantages? Five, can plastic recycling materials that are collected in the city's Blue Blocks program be considered as a source? Six, is a Made in Ottawa pilot program to test this innovation possible based on the above answers? That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. Looking here, we have no other business. Just before we go to adjournment, though, I know I got this awesome note here, and I know you guys probably want to get going here, but I got to do this one because it excites me a lot, and I know our whole crew loves doing this. We all love it because we're all big kids. So just a quick announcement: the Big Wheels Expo is coming up, so we're quite excited about it. It's going to take place Sunday, June 8th. From 9:30 to 1:30 p.m. at the Ottawa Stadium, 300 Coventry Road. Last year we had like 3,000 people come out. It was actually a beautiful day. We all got to pretend we actually know how to drive these things and take photos with them. They didn't let me drive it though. They didn't even let me in the cherry picker. Can you let me do that this time, please? But it was a great free family fun event. You want to come check that out. There's going to be everything, the bread and butter of what we do: snow plows, sidewalk sweepers, garbage trucks, traffic displays, signal demonstrations, road painting. We have log trucks and hydraulic cranes, just to name a few different things that we're going to have there. And this will all be a part of the National Public Works Week, which follows on May 18th to the 24th. So that being said, I want to thank our amazing staff. I think PWIC is the cat's meow of all departments. For that, we're going to look for adjournment. The next meeting will take place June 26, 2025. Thank you very much for everyone's patience today.